The fjord looks calm, which is how it lies to you. Ravenford sits on its edge with a few longhouses, a tired boat shed, and enough winter wind to make everyone speak a little sharper than they mean to. Alden Stone builds boats because wood is honest. His sister Elin runs the farm because someone has to count how many meals are left before hope becomes a luxury. When a local chieftain named Harold Crow starts calling hunger protection and invoices tradition, Alden and a small crew push their luck onto the sea roads, chasing nails, salt, and just enough silver to keep the roof from giving up. The ocean does not care, the markets care too much, and the harsh Viking Age quietly asks the same question every night. How do you survive without becoming the thing you fear? Chapter 1. Frost and Oatmeal at Ravenford. The fjord was doing its favourite trick again, which was to look calm while quietly planning to make everyone miserable. The water lay dark and patient, like it had all the time in the world because it did. The humans on the shore did not. Ravenford sat where the land folded into the sea. A handful of longhouses, a few smaller sheds, and a boat shed that leaned as if it had given it on hope but not on routine. Smoke lifted from roof vents in thin lines because wood was too precious for drama. Inside the stone longhouse, the morning began with the same ceremony as always. Stir the pot, pretend it is more than it is, share it anyway. Alden Stone stood over the hearth with a spoon in her hand and an expression that could curdle milk at 20 paces. The pot held oatmeal, water, and the memory of better meals. She stirred as if she could bully the grains into becoming generous. Alden Stone woke on the sleeping platform and took a breath that tasted like smoke and damp wool. He sat up slowly. His back reminded him that he had spent the previous day bending over a plank, persuading it into the shape of a boat frame. Elin glanced at him. "You are awake. Excellent. Now we can all suffer together." Alden rubbed his face. "Good morning." Elin made a sound that might have been a greeting if someone had carved the warmth out of it years ago. She filled 2 bowls and set them down. The oatmeal did not steam, it barely tried. Alden took his bowl. He ate without complaint, which was his most reliable form of optimism. Outside, the wind nudged the door, testing it. The longhouse did not give in. It had survived worse. Everyone inside it had too, which was the point, and also the problem. Alden looked around. The place held the usual morning cast, a young cousin who pretended not to be hungry, an older uncle who pretended not to be tired, a neighbour who had come early because sharing misery was cheaper than feeding it alone. Mara Ash sat near the hearth with her hands wrapped around a cup of weak broth. She was not family by blood, but blood was only one way to be stuck with people. Mara had arrived in Ravenford the previous spring after a winter elsewhere that had been unkind. She helped when sickness came and when cuts needed cleaning and when grief needed someone to sit beside it without making it worse. She looked up at Alden. "You are moving like a man who tried to wrestle her tree and lost." Alden chewed and swallowed. "I did not wrestle it. I convinced it." Mara nodded. "That is what the losers always say." Elin set the spoon down with sharp care. "Enough. Eat. Then work. If anyone has spare energy for jokes, you can donate it to the woodpile." The cousin smiled faintly and then hid it. Smiling was dangerous in Ravenford. People might expect it again. After the bowls were scraped clean, which was quicker than anyone wanted to admit, the longhouse spilled its people into the cold. The air bit at noses and fingers. The ground was hard with frost. The sky was pale, as if it also wished to stay in bed. Alden pulled on his outer tunic and stepped toward the boat shed. His work lived there. He was a boat builder by trade and by temperament. Wood made sense. It complained honestly. It responded to patience. It did not ask for favours and then pretend it was tradition. The shed smelled of tar and shavings. His half-finished boat frame waited, ribs curved like a giant fish skeleton. He ran a hand over the timber, smooth, strong. It would float if treated with respect. People were harder. Bram Reed arrived with a gust of cold air and too much confidence. Bram was a trader, which meant he could talk about value until the sun went down and still be wrong about what mattered. He had a grin that tried to make the world less heavy, and sometimes it almost succeeded. He clapped Alden on the shoulder. "Morning, builder. I have news." Alden kept his eyes on the frame. "If it is good news, you are lost. If it is bad news, you are early." Bram laughed. "That is why we keep you around. You make misery sound efficient. Listen, a ship came in last night, from the south. They say there are good prices for timber and iron tools in the towns across the sea." Elin appeared at the doorway as if she had been summoned by the word prices. Her eyes narrowed. "Who says?" Bram lifted his hands. "A sailor named Jory Pike. He swears it is true. He also swears he once ate a fish bigger than his boat, so you can decide how much to believe." Elin stepped into the shed. Her boots left frost prints on the packed earth. "Jory Pike owes half the coast money. If he says the sea is wet, I will still check." Bram leaned closer, lowering his voice like he was about to share a sacred secret. "They also say the winter markets are hungry for wool and dried fish. Proper silver, not jot promises." Alden looked at Elin. Silver was a word that made the mind sharper, not because silver solved everything, but because it solved enough. Elin did not smile. She counted in her head. She always did. How much fish? How much wool? How many mouths? How many weeks until the stores ran thin? How many repairs needed before the roof leaked again? How many small disasters waiting in the corners? Bram went on. "And there is talk of building work, boat repairs, new hulls. A good builder could earn more in a month than a farmer earns in a season." Alden felt the idea settle in his chest, heavy and tempting. He did not like leaving Ravenford. He did not like the sea pretending to be calm. But he liked starvation less, and he liked owing people even less than that. Elin turned away and stared at the boat frame. She spoke carefully. "If you go, the farm loses your hands. If you stay, we lose time. Winter does not negotiate." Mara appeared at the shed door. She had a bundle of cloth and herbs tucked under her arm. I heard the word winter and assumed someone was about to make a bad decision. Bram bowed slightly. "Mara Ash, you wound me." Mara walked in and set her bundle down. "I will take my chances." "What is happening?" Alden explained in simple terms. "Trading voyage, work in foreign ports, silver to bring home, risk paid in cold and salt, and the kind of fear that does not make noise." Mara listened without interrupting. When he finished, she nodded once. "If you go, bring bandages. If you stay, bring patience. Both are scarce." Elin crossed her arms. "We cannot send everyone. Someone has to keep the farm alive." Bram pointed at himself with a thumb. "I volunteer to keep the farm alive." Elin looked at him. "No." Bram blinked. That was quick. Elin spoke as if she were explaining to a stubborn goat. "You are useful when you are far away, turning words into fish and cloth. Here, you will trade our last barrel of oats for a story about how good the deal will be next week." Bram sighed. "You have a gift, Elin. It is a cruel gift, but it is real." Alden tried to soften it. "Bram can help on the voyage. He knows the routes." Bram brightened. "Exactly. I know the routes, I know the people, I know what to say." Mara raised an eyebrow. "Knowing what to say is not the same as knowing when to stop." Bram placed a hand over his heart. "I stop all the time." Mara stared until he shifted his weight. "I stop eventually." Elin moved closer to Alden. Her voice was lower now, meant for him. "If you sail, you do it right. Not desperate, not reckless. You take a crew that listens, you take supplies, you leave before the fjord freezes more, and you come back before spring turns to mud." Alden nodded. "I will." Elin exhaled through her nose. That was not agreement, that was a promise. Promises were not free either. Later that day, Alden walked the shore, checking the water and the sky like they were suspicious neighbours. He watched gulls circle and dip. Birds had the advantage of leaving when they wanted. Harold Crow arrived in the afternoon with 2 men, and the kind of presence that suggested the land itself had invited him. He wore a heavy cloak and a polite expression that did not reach his eyes. Elin met him outside the longhouse. She did not bow, she did not rush. Her stillness was her weapon. Harold smiled. "Elin Stone, I hear your brother is building boats again." "Good. Ravenford needs strength. Elin replied. Ravenford needs food. Harold laughed softly, as if she had told a clever joke instead of a truth. Yes, food, and order, and loyalty. You know how it is. Alden came up behind Elin, wiping his hands on a cloth. Harold Crow. What brings you? Harold turned to him. Alden Stone. Your hands are skilled. Skilled hands should serve the community. There are dues this season, more than usual. Elin did not blink. More than usual is what people say when they want to sound reasonable. Harold kept smiling. The coast has been unsettled. Travellers, rival chiefs, the usual noise. I provide protection. Protection has costs. Alden felt the quiet tighten. Protection was a word that could mean safety or pressure, depending on who said it. Harold continued. I will take 2 barrels of dried fish and a bundle of wool by the next full moon. Elin answered. We do not have 2 barrels to spare. Harold looked at her as if she were a child trying to barter with winter. Then you will find them. Mara stood in the doorway watching. Her hands were clean, which meant she had chosen not to work on a cut or a fever at that moment. She had chosen to witness. Alden spoke carefully. Harold, we have had a lean season. The traps were poor. The herd is small. Harold nodded with a sympathy that felt practiced. Then perhaps you will take a voyage, earn silver, buy fish, pay your dues. Everyone wins. Elin narrowed her eyes. You are not offering advice. You are placing a hand on the scale. Harold sighed. Elin, always blunt. It is charming, in a way that makes men regret their choices. Alden felt heat rise in his chest, but he kept his voice level. If we take a voyage, it will be for our survival, not to fatten your storehouse. Harold stepped closer. His men stayed back, but their silence was part of him. Survival is a shared concern. Remember that. If you sail, you will carry a message for me. To a man in York, a trader named Oswin Vale, you will deliver a small pouch and return with what he gives you. Elin cut in. No. Harold looked at her. Yes. Elin did not move. No. Harold's smile thinned. You forget yourself, Elin replied. I remember myself very well. That is why I said no. Alden reached for balance. Harold, we will consider your request, but we do not take unknown pouches to unknown men without knowing what we are carrying. Harold's eyes met his, calm and cold. You will carry it, or you will carry the consequences of refusing. Choose which weight you prefer. He turned and walked away, leaving the air sharper than before. For a while nobody spoke. The fjord kept pretending to be calm. That night the longhouse was quieter. Even Bram's jokes came out softer, like he was afraid they might break something. Elin sat with a small ledger board on her knees, marking lines with a bit of charcoal. Alden watched her count their world into numbers. Mara sat nearby, sewing a tear in a cloak. She spoke without looking up. If you sail, it will not be the sea that tries to unalive you. Alden nodded. I know. Bram cleared his throat. For the record, I would like to say that I do not enjoy being unalived. It would ruin my plans. Elin looked up. Your plans have never needed help being ruined. Bram sighed, then smiled anyway. Still, I would prefer to remain alive, and fed, and perhaps mildly admired. Alden leaned forward. If we go soon. We need a crew, we need supplies, we need to decide about Harold's pouch. Elin's jaw tightened. We do not carry his trouble. Mara tied off her thread. Trouble does not need you to carry it. It follows on its own, but sometimes you choose which trouble you can manage. Alden stared at the fire. He could feel the shape of the voyage already, like a plank bending under pressure. Ravenford needed silver, food, and time. Harold Crow wanted control. The sea wanted nothing and everything. Elin spoke again, slower. If you go, Alden, you bring back enough to last. You do not chase glory. You do not chase revenge. You chase barrels and cloth and iron nails. Alden nodded. I will chase nails, the most heroic thing I have ever heard. Mara's mouth curved slightly. Heroic is overrated. Reliable is better. Bram raised his bowl. To reliability, may it keep us warm. They ate the last of the day's thin stew. The fire cracked softly. Outside, frost settled like a quiet judgment. In the dark, Alden lay awake and listened to the Longhouse breathe. He thought of the boat frame in the shed. He thought of the fjord. He thought of Harold Crow's smile that did not reach his eyes. He thought of Elin counting their lives into lines of charcoal. He did not dream of glory. He dreamed of a roof that did not leak, a pot that was not empty, and a winter where nobody had to pretend they were not hungry. Chapter 2. The Longhouse Ledger. Morning arrived like it had obligations and did not want to meet them. The sky stayed pale and distant. The wind moved along the shore, inspecting every gap in every wall. Elin was already awake, because Elin treated sleep like a rumour. She had the ledger board out again. The marks from last night looked darker in daylight, as if the numbers were growing bolder just to annoy her. Alden stepped outside and saw the sheep clustered near the fence, heads down, searching for grass that had politely resigned for the season. He walked the perimeter, checking posts and knots. Small failures became large problems quickly in winter. This was the Viking Age, where most disasters started with something simple like a loose rope. Bram found him by the fence, rubbing his hands together. "I have been thinking," Alden said. "That is never the beginning of good news." Bram pretended to be wounded. "You hurt me again. I was thinking about the voyage. Routes, markets, timing. We could do this cleanly." Alden looked at him. "Cleanly is a strong word. The sea is never clean. It is just wet and judgmental." Bram grinned. "Fine. Less dirty than usual. We sail to Orkney first. Safer crossing, then down toward York. York has a big market and people who pretend they do not need you while they count your fish." Alden nodded. "Reasonable. But we need supplies." Bram waved toward the longhouse. "Elin has supplies. Elin has everything. If Elin does not have it, it does not exist." Alden almost smiled. He stopped himself out of respect for their circumstances. Inside, Elin was sorting bundles, dried fish wrapped in cloth, small sacks of barley, a bit of cheese that looked like it had survived a war. She was laying them out like offerings to an angry god. Mara sat nearby, preparing a travel kit. Strips of linen, needle and thread, a small pouch of dried herbs, a tiny jar of salve, the kind of tools that did not seem impressive until you needed them. Alden entered. "Elin, we should talk crew." Elin did not look up. "We should talk barrels. We should talk wool. We should talk about how Harold Crow thinks our pantry is his hobby," Alden said. "We will talk about all of it, but first the crew. We cannot sail with just you glaring at the sea from shore." Elin's mouth twitched. "My glare has scared off wolves and cousins. Do not underestimate it." Bram stepped in behind Alden. "I will be the voice of reason." Elin looked at him. "That is a funny thing to say with a straight face." Bram placed a hand on his chest. "I am serious. We need 3 more at least. 1 who can steer, 1 who can row until their arms regret being born, 1 who can stay calm when everything turns cold and loud," Mara added, "and 1 who can follow instructions." Bram smiled. "That will be me." Mara stared. "We need 1 who can follow instructions." Alden cut in before Bram could defend himself with more words. "I was thinking of Callum Wren. He is steady, good with oars, not prone to panic." Elin nodded. "Callum is fine. He has the emotional range of a wooden spoon." "That helps," Bram added. "I know a man named Hugh Tanner. Worked in York once. Speaks enough English to argue with a goat." Alden asked, "Can he keep his mouth shut?" Bram shrugged. "Not always, but he can be useful." Mara spoke quietly. "I will go." Elin looked up sharply. "No." Mara met her eyes. "Yes." Elin's voice was hard. "The farm needs you," Mara replied. "The voyage will need me more, and the farm needs the voyage to succeed. Also, you can boil water and tell people to rest. You already do that." Elin's glare increased. "That is not healing." Mara nodded. "It is a large part of healing." Alden watched them, feeling the familiar tug between staying and leaving. Mara's presence on the voyage would make it safer in 100 small ways, but Elin was right too. A farm without its healer was a colder place. Mara continued, still calm. I have no family here that I cannot carry in my thoughts, and I do not like Harold Crow. I prefer to be present when people like him start counting on silence. That last part landed. Elin looked down at the ledger again, as if the lines might offer an answer. Alden spoke gently. Mara, if you go, you bring only what you need. We cannot spare weight. Mara smiled faintly. I am not bringing a bed, Bram muttered. A pity. I was hoping for luxury. Elin pointed the charcoal at Bram. You are bringing your own luxury. It is called stop talking. Bram held up his hands. I accept the terms. They spent the morning preparing. Elin assigned tasks with the same tone she used for weather reports. You. Nets. You. Repair the fence. You. Salt the last fish. Everyone moved because arguing took energy and Elin treated energy as a resource to be rationed. Alden went to the boat shed and worked on the hull. He checked seams and pegs, ran his fingers along the planks, listening to the wood's quiet truth. He added more tar where the boards met, careful and patient. The smell of tar was almost comforting. It meant effort. It meant preparation. It meant you were doing something besides waiting. Callum Wren arrived in the afternoon. He was broad-shouldered, with a calm face and eyes that missed nothing. He greeted Alden with a nod. Alden asked, Will you sail? Callum said, Yes. Alden waited for more. Callum added, When? Alden exhaled, Soon, before the ice thickens. Callum nodded again, as if that explained the entire world. It did, in a way. Hugh Tanner came next, talking before he reached the door. He smelled faintly of tannin and smoke. His hands were stained from work. He had the restless look of a man who did not enjoy staying in one place long enough to become responsible. Bram introduced him with flair. Hugh Tanner. The finest English speaker on this shore. Hugh snorted. I speak enough to be insulted properly. That is all anyone needs. Elin looked at him. Can you row? Hugh looked at her. Can you stop glaring? Elin replied, No. Hugh smiled. Then yes, I can row. Elin turned away as if she had won. Alden decided she had. Somehow she always did. As evening fell, the longhouse filled with the smell of fish and smoke again. Elin served a meal that was only slightly better than yesterday, which was her way of being generous without admitting it. After they ate, Alden sat by the fire with Bram, Mara, Callum and Hugh. Elin sat apart, ledger in her lap, pretending not to listen while listening to everything. Alden began. The voyage is for trade. We sell fish, wool, and a few crafted items. We buy iron, cloth, salt if we can. We return with enough to keep Ravenford standing. Bram nodded vigorously. Also, we return with stories. Elin spoke without looking up. Stories do not patch roofs. Bram replied, They patch morale. Elin answered, Morale does not feed sheep. Hugh chuckled. I like her. She would survive a siege just to avoid being wrong. Mara said, Do not give her ideas. Alden continued, There is another matter. Harold Crow wants us to carry a message to York, a pouch to a man named Oswin Vale. Callum's brow furrowed slightly. That is trouble, Hugh said. That is not a name you carry lightly. Oswin Vale has friends. He also has enemies. Sometimes they are the same people. Bram tried to sound casual. We could do it. It might make Harold easier to deal with. Elin snapped her gaze up. It might make Harold harder to escape. Bram spread his hands. If we refuse, he squeezes us. If we accept, he claims us. Either way, we have Harold. Mara leaned forward. Not exactly. If you accept, you owe him. If you refuse, you challenge him. There is a difference. Owing lasts longer. Alden stared at the fire. He could almost feel Harold's pouch in his hand, even though it was not there yet. Small, heavy, the kind of weight that changed your path. Hugh cleared his throat. What is in the pouch? Alden said. We do not know. Hugh shrugged. Then do not carry it. I am a simple man. I prefer my trouble visible. Callum added. Better to be cold than owned. Bram looked at Alden. We still need Harold off our backs. He controls the shore. He controls the men who will happily take a barrel from our store and call it justice. Elin spoke with quiet force. Harold controls people who let him. He is not a god, he is a man with a cloak and a habit, Bram said. Yes, a habit of making people regret refusing him. Elin's eyes did not soften. Then let him regret pushing her. I am tired of being polite to wolves. The fire cracked. A log shifted and dropped a small shower of sparks. Everyone watched it fall, as if it were a lesson. Alden finally spoke. We do not carry the pouch. We sail for trade. If Harold wants payment, he can take it from our hands here, in daylight, where everyone can see what kind of protector he is. Bram looked worried. That is bold, Elin said. That is honest. Mara nodded. Honest is sometimes the only shield you have. Hugh smiled. Good. I did not want to arrive in York carrying someone else's secrets. I would rather carry fish. Fish only smell bad. Secrets rot. Callum nodded once more. Then it is settled. Elin's shoulders eased just a fraction. Not relief. She did not do relief, but something close. The next day was all preparation and no romance. Alden checked the boat again. He tightened rope, secured the mast, inspected the steering oar. He packed tools because tools were a builder's comfort. A hammer, wooden pegs, a small adze, a whetstone. The basics of staying useful. Elin sorted supplies into neat piles. She tied bundles with the kind of knots that suggested she did not trust the world to hold itself together. She wrote marks on the ledger board and muttered numbers under her breath. She measured food like it was an argument she intended to win. Mara packed her healing kit and added extra cloth. She tucked in a small charm made of bone and thread, not because she believed in magic, but because people did, and belief could be medicine. Bram collected trade goods and practiced smiles in the reflection of a water bucket. He also practiced looking humble, which did not come naturally and therefore took effort. Hugh helped load the boat and complained the entire time, which in his case meant he felt comfortable. Callum worked silently and efficiently, like a man who had already accepted the sea's opinion of him. As the sun dropped, Alden walked the shoreline with Elin. The fjord had turned a deeper blue, almost black. The cold carried the smell of salt and distant kelp. Elin spoke first. You will come back? Alden answered, Yes. Elin stopped walking and faced him. Do not promise if you cannot keep it. Alden held her gaze. I promise because I intend to keep it, not because it is easy. Elin looked away toward the water. This place is hard, but it is ours. Do not let foreign towns make you forget that, Alden said. I will not. Elin's voice softened only slightly. Bring nails, bring cloth, bring salt, and bring your stubborn head home, because I am not training a new brother. Alden almost laughed, but the sound came out quiet. I will bring my head. The rest of me will follow. They walked back to the longhouse in silence. Inside, the fire was low. The air smelled of smoke and wool and the kind of worry that settled into the rafters. Before sleep, Mara spoke to Alden by the door. You chose to refuse Harold's pouch. That will not end the problem. Alden nodded. I know, Mara said. But it might change the shape of it. Sometimes that is all you get, Alden replied. Sometimes that is enough. Mara touched his arm briefly, then let go. Rest. Tomorrow you meet the sea. The sea likes tired people. They taste like mistakes, Alden managed a small smile. Comforting. Mara's eyes were calm. I try. That night Alden slept lightly. In his dreams he saw the boat sliding into dark water. He saw hands pulling ropes. He heard Elin's voice counting, always counting. He heard Bram's voice talking, always talking. He heard Mara's steady quiet, the sound of someone who did not panic because panic was not helpful. When morning came, the cold was sharper. The fjord still looked calm. The fjord always looked calm. It was rude like that. Chapter 3. The Thing at Stonefield. The road to Stonefield was not really a road. It was a suggestion made by tired feet over many seasons, pressed into the earth and then ignored by the first snowfall that felt offended by human plans. Alden walked with Callum Wren at his side. Bram Reed walked a little ahead, talking to the air like it had requested a lecture. Mara Ash walked behind them, steady and quiet, carrying a bundle that held bandages, herbs, and the unspoken truth that people were fragile even when they pretended they were not. Elin stayed at Ravenford, because someone had to keep the roof from falling into the Oatmeal. She had watched them leave with the same expression she used for storms, which was not fear exactly. It was more like the look of someone measuring the damage in advance so she could complain efficiently later. The thing at Stonefield was held on a low rise where the ground was firm enough to stand on without sinking into mud. That was the highest standard most assemblies aimed for. The field itself was ringed by stones that had been there longer than the arguments, which was saying something. Men and women gathered from nearby farms and hamlets. Some came to settle disputes, some came to hear news, some came because the thing was where you learned what kind of trouble was coming next. Winter had a way of arriving without invitations, but trouble like an audience. As they approached, Alden heard the sound of many voices, all of them certain. The Viking Age was full of certainty. It was a popular hobby. Food was scarce, but confidence was everywhere. Bram inhaled like a man stepping into a market. There it is, law and order. The polite face of threats. Callum grunted. Law is better than fists. Bram looked at him. You say that like you have never been punched, Callum said. I have been punched. Bram waited for more. Callum added, law is still better. Mara spoke softly. Sometimes law is just fists wearing clean hands. Alden said nothing. He had seen enough of both to know she was right and also to know that clean hands were still worth something. In winter, even small improvements mattered. They moved into the crowd. A few people nodded at Alden. He was known here, not famous but known. The man who built boats that did not leak unless the sea became offended and decided to take it personally. Near the stones, a law speaker stood on a flat rock. His name was Edwin Hale, an older man with a voice trained for open-air arguments. He had a thin beard and the patient eyes of someone who had listened to foolishness for decades and survived by turning it into procedure. Edwin raised his hands, quiet. The thing is open. If you have a dispute, bring it forward. If you have a claim, speak it clearly. If you have no claim, then enjoy the weather. Someone muttered that the weather was a poor form of entertainment. The crowd laughed, because laughter was cheaper than firewood. Alden stayed back at first, listening. The early disputes were the usual ones. A boundary stone moved, a goat accused of theft, a marriage promise that had been stretched thin like old rope. Edwin Hale heard each case, asked questions, and then guided the group toward decisions that looked fair enough to prevent immediate shouting. Alden watched and learned, not because he loved law, but because law could decide whether Ravenford survived. That was annoying, but so was hunger. A woman stepped forward, small and straight-backed, with grey hair braided tight. Her name was Rilla Brooke. Alden recognized her. She lived inland and had buried a husband 2 winters ago. Since then, her neighbours had treated her land like a shared resource. Widows were always surrounded by helpful people with very active hands. Rilla spoke in a clear voice. My neighbour Finn Sutter has been cutting my trees. Finn Sutter stepped forward. A broad man with a red nose and the look of someone who had never lost an argument in his own head, he replied quickly. The trees are close to the boundary. I took only what was leaning on my side. Rilla did not flinch. Your side has grown wider every week. A few people snorted. Edwin Hale held up a hand. He looked at Finn. Do you have witnesses? Finn gestured toward 2 men who stepped forward with the eager expression of people who had been promised meat later. Edwin then looked at Rilla. Do you have witnesses? Rilla said. I have stumps. They do not speak, but they are honest. The crowd murmured. Alden felt his mouth tighten. Wood was honest, people were not. Edwin sent a few men to inspect the boundary stones. While they walked away, he kept the crowd busy with another case. A young man accused another of taking a fishing net. The accused replied that the net was on the shore, which meant it belonged to the sea, which meant everyone could borrow it. This was an argument that sounded clever, until you remembered that winter existed. When the inspectors returned, they reported that the boundary stone had been shifted. Finn Sutter looked offended, as if the stone had done it on its own out of spite. Edwin Hale spoke. The stone is moved. Finn Sutter, you will return wood to Rilla Brook, and you will replace her boundary stone to its proper place. You will also provide 1 day of labour to her farm before the next new moon, to remind your hands where they belong. Finn's face reddened. That is harsh, Edwin replied. Harsh is cutting her trees and expecting her to smile. This is fair. Rilla nodded once and stepped back. She did not thank anyone, she did not need to. She had defended her life in public, and that was enough. Alden felt something settle in him. Law could work. It could be slow and imperfect, but it could work. That mattered. Bram leaned toward Alden and whispered, "Remind me to never move Elin's boundary stones," Alden whispered back. "Elin would move your teeth." Mara heard and murmured, "That would be a different court." As the thing continued, Harold Crow arrived. He did not walk like a man approaching equals. He walked like a man approaching property that had not realized it was his yet. His cloak was thick, his boots clean, and his smile politely dangerous. The crowd shifted. Some people nodded quickly, some looked down, some watched carefully, hoping to learn which way the wind would blow so they could pretend they had agreed with it all along. Harold stepped onto the open ground near the stones. Edwin Hale nodded at him, not warmly, but with the stiff respect that kept things from falling apart. Harold raised his voice. "Friends, neighbours, I bring word. The coast remains unsettled. Traders report trouble to the south. Men with hungry eyes, I will be strengthening our defences." A few people murmured approval. Harold continued, "This will require contributions, fish, wool, labour. We will not be caught unprepared." Alden felt the familiar tightening. Harold was good at turning fear into payment. Edwin Hale spoke carefully. "Harold Crow, the thing can hear your request, but contributions should be agreed by those giving them." Harold smiled. "Of course, we will agree. We always agree when we care about our families." That was the trick. If you disagreed, you did not care about your family. It was an impressive piece of logic. It was also garbage. Harold's gaze found Alden. He walked over with calm purpose. Alden did not move. He stood with Callum and Mara and Bram. He did not want to look like he was running. He also did not want to look like he was challenging Harold in front of everyone. There were many ways to be foolish. Alden preferred the kind that did not get his roof burned in the night. Harold stopped a few steps away. "Alden Stone, I hear you are preparing a voyage." Bram opened his mouth, likely to decorate the truth with a story. Mara cleared her throat softly. Bram closed his mouth. "It was a miracle, and everyone pretended not to notice." Alden replied, "We are preparing, yes, for trade." Harold nodded. "Good. Trade brings strength, strength brings safety, and safety brings gratitude," Alden said. "Safety also brings empty barrels if the gratitude is forced." Harold's smile stayed in place, but his eyes sharpened. "You have a sharp tongue for a boat builder," Alden answered. "Wood does not lie to me, so I have time to practice." A few people nearby coughed to hide their amusement. Harold heard it. Of course he did. Harold leaned closer, voice low. "About the pouch. Have you reconsidered?" Alden kept his tone steady. "We will not carry unknown goods to unknown men." Harold's eyes narrowed. "Oswin Vale is known." Hugh Tanner was nearby now, listening. He spoke without stepping forward. "Known is not the same as safe." Harold glanced toward Hugh. "You are not one of mine," Hugh replied. "I am one of myself." "That is already enough trouble." Harold returned his attention to Alden. "Refusing me in public is unwise," Alden said. "I am not refusing you in public, I am refusing you in daylight, which is different. In public suggests I want an audience. In daylight suggests I want the truth to be visible." Harold's smile thinned. "Truth is a flexible thing." Mara spoke quietly. "Not as flexible as you hope." Harold looked at her. "Mara Ash, a healer." "I respect your work." "People who keep others alive are useful," Mara replied. "People who keep others afraid are also useful." "I still do not respect them." The air went tight. Several heads turned. Someone shifted their feet. A raven called from a nearby tree, because even the birds enjoyed a little tension. Edwin Hale stepped forward, voice louder, claiming authority. "The thing is not a place for private threats. If you have a claim, speak it as a claim." Harold turned to Edwin with a polite nod. "Of course, I have a claim." Alden Stone's farmstead owes dues for protection, 2 barrels of dried fish and a bundle of wool by the next full moon. Alden felt the crowd's attention settle on him like snow. Ravenford was not the only place struggling. Everyone understood hunger. But everyone also understood what happened when Harold decided someone was an example. Edwin Hale looked at Alden. "Do you dispute the due?" Alden answered carefully. "I dispute the amount. Ravenford had a lean season. The sea gave less, the traps gave less, the herd gave less. We will pay what we can, but what Harold asks is beyond our capacity without harming our children and elders." Harold's mouth curved. Always the same plea. "My family also eats," Alden said. "Yes. Your family eats first." A low sound moved through the crowd, not quite laughter, not quite agreement. It was the sound people make when they want to say something but also want to keep their roofs. Edwin Hale raised a hand again. Silence. Harold Crow. "Dues should be proportional and agreed." Alden Stone. "Propose what you can pay." Alden took a breath. He could feel Hewlin's counting in his mind, like a steady drum. If he offered too little, Harold would squeeze harder. If he offered too much, Ravenford would starve. The clever answer was one that gave Harold something he valued while costing Ravenford less food. Alden said, "We can provide 1 barrel of fish and a smaller bundle of wool. In addition, I will provide boat repair work for Harold's boats before spring, without charge. That is labour, that is value, and it does not empty our pantry." Bram blinked. That was surprisingly sensible. He looked offended, as if Alden had stolen his role. Harold frowned slightly. "Boat work is useful, but it is not as immediate as fish," Alden replied. "Fish is immediate, but it is also finite. A repaired boat brings more fish later. That is a better investment, unless you are planning to be somewhere else by then." Harold's eyes flashed. Edwin Hale watched him closely. Callum Wren spoke, voice low but firm. "Boats keep us alive. A boat builder's labour is not nothing." A few others murmured agreement. Not because they loved Alden, but because they loved the idea of dues being negotiated. If Alden could push, maybe they could too. People always enjoyed bravery when it improved their own chances. Harold took a slow breath. He did not like giving ground, but he liked losing face even less. He said, 1 barrel and the wool, and the boat work, fine. But if you fail, you will owe twice in spring." Elin would have called that a threat dressed as fairness. Alden called it what it was in his mind and kept his face calm. Edwin Hale spoke. "The thing records this agreement. Harold Crow receives 1 barrel of fish and a smaller bundle of wool by the next full moon. Alden Stone provides boat work before spring. If Alden fails without good cause, further negotiation may be held at the next thing. Not twice. Negotiation. We are not animals." Harold's jaw tightened. Then he nodded. "As you say." He leaned toward Alden again, softer. "You have bought yourself time. Do not mistake time for victory." Alden replied, "I do not. I mistake time for time, which is already rare." Harold stepped back and turned away, cloak sweeping behind him like a curtain closing on a play that would continue later. His men followed. The crowd exhaled, not fully, just enough to keep breathing. Bram let out a careful sigh. "You handled that well. I hate that. It makes me feel unnecessary," Mara said. "You are still unnecessary. But now you can be unnecessary and quiet." Bram looked wounded. "I am being attacked by the healer," Hugh Tanner muttered. "You will live," Callum said. "Probably." They stayed through the end of the thing, more disputes, more small decisions that kept people from turning on each other in the long dark season. Alden listened and watched and learned how much of survival was really just agreement. Agreement to share, agreement to stop, agreement to not let the worst voices win. On the walk back toward Ravenford, Alden felt the weight of the negotiated deal. It was lighter than Harold's demand, but it was still weight. Mara walked beside him. "You did a good thing," Alden asked. "Which part?" Mara replied. "You did not bow, you did not swing at him, you did not pretend he is a god. You treated him like a man who can be negotiated with, which is the only way men like him ever learn their limits," Bram added. Also, you said the line about being somewhere else by spring. That was bold. I admired it, quietly. Alden said, "Do not admire it out loud. Harold hears admiration like a dog hears meat." Hugh laughed once. "That is a grim image." Alden nodded. "It is also accurate." When they reached Ravenford, Elin met them outside the Longhouse. She looked at Alden's face and then at his hands, as if she could read the outcome in his grip. Alden spoke first. 1 barrel, smaller wool, and boat work. Elin exhaled, a controlled release. "Better. Not good. Better," Alden added. "We sail soon." Elin's eyes narrowed. "Soon means when," Alden replied. "Within days. Before ice and before Harold decides to change his mind." Elin nodded. "Then we count again. We pack again. We pretend this is normal," Mara said. "It is normal for winter. Winter is rude." Elin looked at her. "Winter is honest. People are rude." Alden stepped toward the boat shed, feeling the next chapter of his life waiting in the shape of wood and rope and cold water. Chapter 4. The Sea That Pretends to be Calm. Launch day did not arrive with fanfare. It arrived with cold fingers and a pale sky, as if the world was trying to pretend nothing important was happening. This was a common strategy. It rarely worked. Alden woke before dawn. The Longhouse was quiet except for the soft sounds of people breathing and the occasional shift of someone dreaming of better meals. He rose, pulled on his tunic and stepped outside. The air smelled of salt and frost. The fjord lay smooth, dark, and almost polite. Alden did not trust it. He had built boats. He knew that what looked smooth was often just waiting. At the boat shed, the hull sat ready. Not perfect, but sturdy, like most things in Ravenford. Callum Wren arrived first, silent and solid. He carried a coil of rope and an expression that suggested he had already accepted whatever happened next. Hugh Tanner arrived next, complaining about the cold as if the cold had asked for his opinion. Bram Reed arrived last, somehow already talking. Elin came down to the shore with a bundle of supplies and the same steady glare she used for all major life events. Mara Ash walked with her, carrying her kit and a small sack of dried food. Alden greeted Elin. She did not hug him. Hugging was for warm seasons and softer families. Instead, she thrust a bundle into his arms. She said, "Food, cloth, a little salt. Do not waste it. Do not trade it for stories." Bram placed a hand on his chest. "I would never." Elin looked at him. "You would." Bram lowered his hand. "I would, but I will try not to." Elin turned to Alden. "You will send word if you can." Alden nodded. "If there is a way." Elin's mouth tightened. "There is always a way, if you do not die," Alden replied. "Then I will not die." Mara stepped closer, voice low. "Try not to say that like a challenge. The sea loves a challenge." Alden almost smiled. He did not, because Elin was watching. They loaded the boat. Bundles were tied down, barrels were secured, tools were tucked into safe corners. Everyone moved with careful efficiency, because dropping something into the fjord would be embarrassing and also expensive. When everything was ready, they dragged the boat toward the water. The hull slid over rollers with a low groan. It sounded like the boat was complaining, which was fair. Bram pushed hard and said, "Come on, we made you. You owe us," Hugh muttered. "Nothing owes you anything. That is why you keep suffering." The boat kissed the water and floated, steady and calmed. Alden felt a small relief. The first truth of a boat was whether it wanted to be a boat. This one did. Elin stood at the edge of the shore. She did not wave. She held her hands still, fingers curled lightly. Her eyes were fixed on Alden, and her face was carved with the command to come back. Alden stepped into the boat. Callum and Hugh followed. Bram hopped in with a flourish that suggested he believed the sea enjoyed showmanship. Mara stepped in last, balanced and calm. Alden took the steering oar and looked back one more time. He saw Elin, smaller against the longhouse and the hills, and he felt the pull of home like a rope around his chest. Then he turned forward. They pushed off. The shore slid away. For a while the fjord was kind, the boat moved smoothly, the oars dipped and rose. The rhythm of rowing settled into their bodies. It was work, but it was honest work. Honest work was almost comforting. Bram talked because Bram could not leave silence alone. Silence made Bram nervous, and Bram responded to nervousness by trying to sell it something. He said, "You know, I once sailed this route in spring. The sea was gentle. It was like rowing on polished stone." Hugh replied, "That sounds like a terrible place to row." Bram frowned. "You are missing the spirit," Hugh said. "I am preserving my sanity." Mara spoke softly. "Let him talk. It keeps his fear busy." Bram brightened. "Thank you. Someone appreciates me," Mara added. "I appreciate you as a distract." A boat was not just wood. It was people moving together, agreeing on a rhythm. When the rhythm was good, the boat felt like it had one body. By midday they were beyond the shelter of the fjord walls. The open sea spread out, grey and wide. The wind picked up, sharp and salty. Alden raised the sail and felt the boat lean into it. Hugh watched the horizon. Clouds sat low, smeared across the sky. He said, "Weather is coming." Bram tried to sound confident. "Weather is always coming." Hugh replied, "Yes, but this one looks like it has plans." Alden kept his voice calm. "We keep the sail trimmed, we keep the boat light, we do not fight the sea, we work with it." Bram asked, "Does the sea work with us?" Alden answered, "The sea does not work with anyone, the sea tolerates." Mara said, "That is also how Elin runs the farm." Bram laughed, then quieted as the wind rose. The first signs of trouble were small. A change in the air, a darker line under the clouds, the water turning from gentle swells to restless chop. The boat began to slap the waves, not hard yet, but enough to remind them that comfort was temporary. Alden adjusted the sail, Callum and Hugh shifted their weight. Bram stopped talking for a full minute, which was how Alden knew it was serious. Then the wind hit harder. The boat leaned, spray flew, cold water splashed over the bow and into their laps. The sea did not care that they were dressed for cold. The sea believed everyone should be colder, just to stay humble. Hugh swore, then caught himself and replaced it with a grunt. He looked at Mara as if he had been trained like a dog. Mara gave a faint nod. "Good choice," Bram said. "This is fine. This is very fine. Everyone stay calm." "I am calm," Callum said. "You are talking too much." Bram snapped his mouth shut. For about 10 seconds, Alden shouted over the wind, "Reef the sail, less cloth, less pull." Callum moved to help. Hugh worked the lines quickly. Their fingers stiffened from cold, rope burned their palms. The boat bounced and rocked, and the horizon tilted like the world had decided to be dramatic. Bram clung to the side and tried to look useful. He said, "I can hold something. Tell me what to hold." Mara replied, "Your tongue." Bram held his tongue. It was impressive. The storm did not arrive as one huge moment. It arrived as many smaller moments that added up. The rain began, thin at first, then thicker, slanting into their faces. The wind whined through the rigging, the waves rose higher. Alden kept his hands on the steering oar. He felt every push and pull. He tried to keep the boat angled so they took the waves without being swallowed by them. He did not say the scary words. He did not need to. Everyone knew them anyway. A larger wave lifted the boat and dropped it hard. The hull shuddered. A crack sounded, not wood breaking, but something shifting. Alden's heart jumped. Hugh shouted. "That did not sound good," Alden replied. "Helpful." Mara leaned forward, eyes sharp. What shifted? Alden scanned the boat. He saw it. One of the lashings on a bundle had loosened. A barrel had rolled slightly and knocked against a support. The support was still in place, but the barrel was now a threat with round edges. Alden shouted, "Secure that barrel, now." Callum moved with calm speed. He wedged the barrel and tightened the rope. Hugh helped, pulling hard, fingers red. Bram hovered like a worried bird. Bram said, "I can help." Hugh snapped. "Then help. Pull." Bram grabbed the rope and pulled with effort. His face went pale. Not from cold, but from the realization that the sea did not accept charm as payment. Mara watched their hands. She said, "Do not wrap the rope around your wrist. If it snaps, you will regret your life." Bram released and adjusted quickly. "Understood. I prefer my wrist attached." The storm reached its peak and held them there. Wind, rain, spray, cold that crawled into cloth and tried to make bones feel old. Alden's arms ached from steering, his shoulders burned. His mouth tasted like salt. Time became strange. It might have been an hour, it might have been 2. The sea did not provide clocks. At one point, the boat took a wave over the side. Water poured in, heavy and fast. Bram elped. Mara did not. Alden shouted, "Bail!" Hugh grabbed the wooden scoop and started throwing water back out. Callum followed, working in rhythm. Bram joined, frantic but trying. Mara steadied herself and kept an eye on their faces, watching for panic like it was an infection. She said calmly, "Breathe. Slow. Breathe again. If you faint, the sea will not pick you up." Bram gasped. "That is not comforting." Mara replied, "It is accurate." Alden kept the bow angled. He spoke like he was giving instructions in the boat shed. Calm, simple, do this, now this. He knew that if his voice cracked, the boat would feel it. Eventually the wind eased. Not stopped, but eased. The rain softened. The waves lowered from angry to annoyed. The sea was not forgiving them. It was just bored. Alden lowered the sail further and let the boat ride the remaining swells. He felt the tension in his chest loosen a little, like a knot relaxing but not untying. Hugh kept bailing until the bottom of the boat was wet, not swimming. Callum checked the lashings again. Bram sat back, breathing hard, eyes wide. He looked like a man who had just met reality and realized it was not impressed. Mara crouched beside Bram. "Any injuries?" Bram shook his head quickly. "Only my pride." Mara nodded. "Pride heals slowly, but it usually heals." Bram managed a weak laugh. "I do not know if I enjoy the sea," Hugh replied. "The sea does not care," Callum said. "That is the sea's best feature. It treats everyone the same." Alden looked at the sky. A lighter patch opened near the horizon. The cloud cover was thinning. The wind shifted, becoming more useful than cruel. They adjusted the sail and continued. As the day faded into late afternoon, the light turned soft and thin. The storm had washed the air clean, leaving it sharp and clear. The sea still rolled, but with less malice. Alden checked the boat. No broken planks, no damaged mast. The lashings held, the barrel stayed in place. The crew was cold, wet, and exhausted, but they were still moving. Bram spoke softly, almost reverent. "We are still here," Alden replied. "Yes." Bram looked at him. "Is it always like that?" Alden thought of all the voyages before, and all the ones he had avoided. He answered honestly, "Sometimes it is worse. Sometimes it is calmer. The sea keeps its options open," Mara said. "That is also how winter works." They ate a small amount of food, careful and slow. The act of chewing felt like a luxury. Alden forced himself to drink water even though it was cold and tasted faintly of tar from the container. He knew thirst made mistakes easier. As dusk approached, Alden saw it. A faint shape on the horizon. Land, low and dark. Hugh squinted. "Orkney." Callum nodded. "We made good time, considering the sea tried to teach us a lesson." Bram whispered, "What lesson?" Mara answered, "That you cannot bargain with weather." Bram swallowed. "I will pretend I already knew that." They reached calmer water near shore. The wind eased again. The boat drifted toward a rocky inlet. Alden guided them carefully, avoiding hidden stones. The sea near land had its own way of being rude. When the hull finally scraped gently onto the shore, everyone exhaled at once. It was not victory, it was arrival, which in winter was close enough. They climbed out. Their legs felt strange, like the ground was moving wrong. Hugh stretched and groaned. Callum looked around, alert. Bram stood still, eyes closed, as if he was thanking the land for being solid. Mara spoke quietly. "We dry off, we find shelter. We do not celebrate too loudly. The sea can hear you, even when it pretends it cannot." Alden looked back at the water. The fjord was far behind them now. Ravenford was a memory carried in the chest. Elin's glare was also a memory, sharp and steady. He whispered, not to anyone, just to the cold air. We are still here. Chapter 5. Orkney Wind and Borrowed Shelter. Orkney greeted them the way Orkney greeted everyone, with wind that felt personally offended by the idea of warmth. The shore was dark rock and cold grass, and the air tasted like salt and old patience. Alden pulled the boat higher onto the beach with Callum and Hugh. Bram tried to help and mostly succeeded at being wet in new places. Mara stood a little apart, watching their hands and faces the way she watched fevers. Exhaustion could spread through a crew faster than any illness. Hugh wrung out his tunic. I would like to file a complaint with the sky. Callum looked up. The sky will not answer, Bram said. That is because the sky is ashamed. Mara replied, The sky has no shame, it has weather. Alden pointed inland. We need shelter before the cold settles deeper. We dry out, we eat. We find someone who will trade without trying to charge us for breathing. Bram brightened. I can handle that part, Mara said. That is what worries me. They carried bundles up from the boat and stacked them above the tide line. Alden checked the lashings again. He had learned the sea lesson, and he preferred not to pay tuition twice. A thin track led from the beach toward a cluster of buildings on a low rise. The largest was a longhouse with a turf roof and smoke drifting from a vent. Smaller sheds crouched nearby like they were trying to hide from the wind. As they approached, a dog barked, then another. A pair of men stepped out, hands near their belts, faces cautious. One was older, broad across the shoulders, with grey in his beard and a look that suggested he had spent a lifetime being unimpressed. The other was younger, leaner, and curious in the way young men often were when trouble arrived. The older man called out. You are late for the summer. Bram stepped forward with a careful smile. We heard summer was overrated. The older man snorted once, which might have been a laugh. Who are you? Alden answered. Traders from Ravenford. We need shelter for the night and a chance to dry. We can pay in fish and work. The older man studied them. His eyes lingered on the boat, and then on Alden's hands, which were rough with honest skill. He nodded slightly. I am Ewan Thorne. This is Kirkstead. If you bring trouble, you will take it back with you, Bram said. We are very good at taking trouble with us. It follows naturally. Mara cleared her throat. We are tired. We want warmth and a quiet corner. We will be gone soon. Ewan Thorne looked at Mara, then nodded again. A healer. Good. We have a cough in the house and a child who thinks hunger is a hobby. Come in, but do not crowd my hearth like seagulls. Inside, Kirkstead smelled of smoke, damp wool, and barley bread. Warmth hit them like a gentle shove. Alden felt his fingers begin to sting as they warmed, which was the body's way of reminding him that pain was always available. A woman moved near the hearth, stirring a pot. She looked up with tired eyes and a steady face. Ewan said, This is Lysa, my wife. Be polite. Bram bowed slightly. I am always polite. Lysa looked at him. Then you are doing it wrong. Hugh coughed a laugh and then looked at Mara as if he had made a risky choice. Mara did not scold him. She only watched the child by the wall, thin and quiet, who was staring at their wet clothes like they were something expensive. Mara spoke gently to Lysa. You said a cough. Lysa nodded toward an older woman on a sleeping platform. My mother. It is not new, but it is worse in cold. Mara moved over, asked simple questions, and listened. The older woman wheezed softly, eyes half closed. Mara touched her wrist, checked her breathing, and nodded. Smoke and cold. I can help with steam and herbs. She needs air that does not burn her lungs. Hard to find in a longhouse, I know. Ewan grunted. The wind would take the roof if we opened the vents more. Mara replied. Then we make smaller changes. We keep her near the vent when the wind allows. We keep her away from thick smoke. We keep her warm. And we do not pretend it will fix itself. Lysa's shoulders eased a little. Thank you. Alden sat near the hearth, hands extended to the heat. Callum and Hugh did the same, silent and practical. Bram began talking with the younger man, who introduced himself as Rowan Thorne, Ewan's son. Rowan Thorne asked, "You came from Norway?" Bram nodded. "Yes, Ravenford." Rowan Thorne looked impressed. "I have never sailed that far," Hugh muttered. "Be glad, the sea has opinions." Rowan Thorne asked, "Is it true you raid?" Alden answered before Bram could decorate the truth. "We fish, we trade, we survive. Some men raid, some men count barrels. Most men just get cold and pretend it is fine." Rowan Thorne blinked, then smiled slightly. "That sounds less exciting," Mara said. "Exciting is a trap." Bram pointed at Mara as if she had proven his point. "See." "The healer agrees with me. Life is full of traps," Mara replied. "That is not what I said, but it is still true." They ate a simple meal. Barley porridge, dried fish, a little bread. It tasted better than it would have at Ravenford, mostly because it was warm and because they did not have to measure every spoonful in their heads. After the meal, Ewan Thorne spoke with Alden near the door. "You said you can pay with work." "What work?" Alden said. "Boat work. Repairs. Caulking. Anything on wood that needs honest hands." Ewan nodded toward the shore. "My neighbour has a small boat with seams that leak when the tide is high. He blames the sea blames him. If you fix it, I will give you a sack of barley and a small wheel of cheese." Bram drifted closer, hearing barter like a dog hearing meat. "We can also trade fish for wool." Ewan looked at Bram. "I do not need wool. I need oil and salt, and I need my son to stop thinking he can live on stories," Rowan Thorne protested. "I can live on stories," Lysa said. "You can live on stories after you have eaten." Rowan Thorne fell quiet, defeated by the universal law of mothers. Bram tried again. "We have fish. We can offer fish for oil and salt." Ewan considered. "Oil is scarce, salt is scarcer, but I can ask around. Some men keep salt hidden like it is a second wife," Hugh said. "That sounds like a poor second wife." Callum spoke for the first time in a while. "People keep what keeps them alive." Ewan nodded. "Exactly. Still, if you fix the boat and you do not cause trouble, I will speak for you. On Orkney, a stranger without a voice is just another piece of driftwood." Alden accepted. "Thank you." The night settled. The wind pressed at the walls. Inside, the longhouse breathed and shifted and creaked like a ship on land. Alden lay on a platform near the far end, listening to strangers sleep. It felt wrong and also familiar. Many nights on the sea were like this, resting beside people you did not fully know, trusting that trust would hold. In the early hours before dawn, Alden woke to a low sound near the door. Not loud, but wrong. He sat up. The fire was low. Shadows moved. He saw it. A man crouched near their bundles, fingers working at a knot. Alden rose quietly and stepped forward. His voice stayed calm. "Put that down." The man froze, then straightened slowly. He was not from Kirkstead. His face was sharp, his eyes quick. He held a small pouch in his hand. Not Harold's pouch. Alden felt a grim relief and an immediate irritation. It was still theft. It was still trouble. The man said, "I thought it was mine." Alden replied, "It is not." The man took a step back toward the door. Alden moved with him, blocking the path without touching him. He did not want a fight in a stranger's house. He wanted the problem to end without waking everyone and turning the night into a spectacle. Bram's voice came from the darkness. "Are we being robbed? I feel like we are being robbed." Hugh sat up with a sigh. "Of course." Mara was already awake, sitting up with her hair loose and her eyes sharp. She said, "Do not be foolish. Everyone is tired." The man looked between them and decided tired people were still dangerous. He set the pouch down slowly. Alden said, "Leave." The man hesitated, then bolted out the door. The longhouse stirred. Ewan Thorne rose with the quick anger of a man who did not like his home being tested. He grabbed a staff and stepped outside. Alden followed. The wind hit like a slap. The thief was already running down slope. Ewan shouted, "Tamsin, get back here." The name carried in the wind. Tamsin, a neighbour boy perhaps, a desperate man perhaps. On harsh islands those could be the same thing. Ewan returned, jaw tight. He is from the next ridge. He thinks hunger gives him permission, Bram said. Hunger does give permission, it just also gives consequences. Ewan looked at Alden. Did he take anything? Alden shook his head. No. He tried. Ewan nodded. Then we handle it in daylight, not now. Mara stepped closer to Ewan. If he is hungry, do you feed him? Ewan's eyes narrowed. If I feed him, I feed 10 like him. If I do not feed him, he steals and gets himself unalived by someone with less patience than Alden. Mara held his gaze. Then you choose the least bad path, Ewan said. That is the only path there is. Alden felt the quiet tension of the islands. Hunger, pride and wind, all grinding together like stones. Ravenford was harsh, but Orkney had its own sharp edges. In the morning, after thin light crawled into the sky, they went to the shore. Alden inspected the neighbour's leaking boat. It was small, rough-built and tired. The seams near the bow were dry and cracked. Alden could almost hear Elin in his head, saying that neglect was just a slow form of stupidity. The neighbour arrived. His name was Stenmarsh, a man with weathered skin and eyes that did not trust easily. He greeted Alden with a nod, then looked at Bram as if Bram were a sales pitch in human form. Alden said, "The seams need fresh tar and new fibres. The keelboard also needs a peg replaced. It is loose." Stenmarsh frowned. "It never leaked before," Hugh said. "Everything leaks before it leaks. That is how leaking works." Stenmarsh ignored Hugh. "How long?" Alden answered, "Half a day if the wind does not turn worse." Stenmarsh nodded. "Do it." Alden worked with Callum helping. Hugh held the boat steady on supports. Bram attempted to assist by fetching tools and narrating their progress to anyone within reach. Mara stayed near the longhouse, checking on the older woman and preparing a steam pot with herbs. As Alden pressed fibres into seams and smeared tar with careful strokes, he felt the steady calm of craft return. Wood did not lie, tar did not pretend. A seam either held or it did not. There was comfort in that. By midday the boat was sealed, pegs tight, seams fresh. Stenmarsh tested it by splashing water along the bow and watching for seepage. Nothing came through. He nodded once. Good. Ewan Thorne kept his word. A sack of barley, a small wheel of cheese. Not large, but meaningful. Bram cradled the cheese like it was a newborn child and whispered about its beauty. Mara said, "Do not whisper at the cheese, eat it." Bram sighed. The world is so demanding. In the afternoon, Ewan took them to a small gathering near a stone marker. Not a full thing, but a local meeting, because island life could not afford to ignore problems for long. Tamsin arrived, the would-be thief, with his head down and his hands empty. He looked thin, cheeks hollow, eyes darting. He did not look evil, he looked hungry and stupid, which was far more common. Ewan spoke. "You tried to steal from guests in my house," Tamsin muttered. "I was hungry." Ewan replied, "We are all hungry. We just do not all steal." Mara stepped forward. "A question. Does he have family?" A woman answered from the side. "A mother. She is sick. He has been trying to find food." Ewan's face hardened and softened at once, which was a strange look. He said, "Then he works. He hauls water for the Thornhouse for 3 days. He repairs fence posts for Stenmarsh for 2 days, and then he comes to me and asks for food like a human, not like a rat." Tamsin swallowed. "Yes," Bram whispered to Alden. "This island has surprisingly sensible consequences," Alden whispered back. "Hunger makes people practical, eventually." When they returned to Kirkstead, Ewan Thorne handed Alden a small pouch of salt. "Not much, but enough to matter," Ewan said. "A man owed me. I called it in. Do not waste it." Alden accepted it with both hands. "Thank you." Ewan nodded. "You sail onward," Alden replied. "Tomorrow, if the water allows." Ewan looked out toward the sea. The sea always allows until it does not. Sleep, eat, leave before you start thinking this place is easy. That night they ate barley porridge with a few shavings of cheese, and it felt like a feast. Bram sighed with happiness, and then looked guilty for enjoying anything. Mara watched him and said nothing, which was her way of letting him have it. Alden lay down and listened to the wind. He thought of Ravenford, he thought of Elin counting, he thought of Harold Crow waiting, he thought of York and the market and the unknown faces there. He slept anyway, because tomorrow would demand strength, and strength was not something you could talk into existence. Chapter 6: York Market and Quiet Bargains. They left Orkney under a sky that looked like it had been scrubbed clean. The wind was still cold, because the world had standards, but it was steady. The boat moved with less argument. Alden did not mistake this for kindness. He took it as a pause between insults. The crossing south was calmer than the first. Not gentle, but manageable. The sea rolled in long swells and the sail pulled true. Callum rowed when needed, steady as ever. Hugh watched the horizon and complained in short bursts, which Alden found comforting in a strange way. Bram spoke again, carefully, like a man who had learned that words did not float. Mara sat near the bundles, mending a torn strap. She looked up and said, "If you keep improving, Bram, people will stop recognizing you." Bram replied, "I do not want that. I want to be recognized for my charm." Hugh said, "The sea recognized your charm and tried to drown it." Bram looked offended. "The sea is jealous." Alden guided them toward the river route that led inland. Water changed character near land, the salt softened, the waves lowered, the air began to smell of wet earth and smoke from distant settlements. The world felt more crowded, more watched. By late afternoon they reached the approaches to York. Not the city itself yet, but the signs of it. More boats, more people, more rules hiding behind simple greetings. Alden saw the first wooden palisade and the clustered buildings beyond. Smoke rose in thicker columns. He heard the hum of many voices, the busy sound of a place that believed it mattered. Bram's eyes shone. York. A market that never sleeps. A place where you can buy a spoon, a horse, and a new identity if you have the silver. Hugh said, "You have no silver?" Bram replied. "Yet." Callum looked uneasy. "Too many people," Mara said. "People are like waves. One is manageable. Too many will knock you over." Alden guided the boat to a dock area where other traders tied up. Men watched them approach, eyes weighing their boat, their goods, their crew. Alden felt the familiar pressure of being evaluated. At sea, the only judge was water. In towns, everyone judged. A dock worker stepped forward, hand out. Mooring fee. Bram started to speak. Alden raised a hand. Alden asked, "How much?" The dock worker named a price. It sounded like he had invented it in the moment. Bram smiled tightly. "That is a very interesting price." The dock worker shrugged. "It is the price?" Hugh muttered. "It is a theft with paperwork," Mara said softly. "Pay it or argue and lose time." Time is also a price. Alden paid with a small piece of silver they had saved for necessities. A hurt, not because it was large, but because it was not for food. It was for permission to exist in someone else's space. They tied up. Alden checked the knots twice. In a crowded place, theft did not sneak. It walked confidently, like it belonged there. They unloaded the goods they could carry and left the rest secured under watch. Callum volunteered to stay near the boat in shifts. Hugh stayed with him at first because Hugh did not trust anyone, including Callum, though he trusted Callum more than most. Bram led Alden and Mara toward the market streets. York was a maze of timber buildings, narrow lanes and muddy corners where the ground had given up. People moved in all directions, carrying baskets, pushing carts, shouting prices and pretending their shouting was friendly. Alden kept his face calm and his posture steady. He did not want to look like a man who could be pushed. Bram whispered, "The trick is to look like you know where you are going, even when you do not." Mara whispered back, "That is also how you live your life." Bram accepted this as praise. They reached the main market area. Stalls lined the open space. Cloth merchants, metal workers, spice sellers, fishmongers, wood carvers. The air was a mix of smells, some good, some alarming. Smoke, sweat, roasted meat, wet wool, and something sweet that Alden could not name. Bram inhaled deeply. Civilization. Hugh would have called it a crowded disaster. Alden called it opportunity and risk, braided together. They found a spot to lay out their goods. Dried fish first because it made people hungry or annoyed, and both reactions could lead to deals. Wool next, bundled tight. A few small crafted items, wooden pegs, carved handles, simple tools Alden had made in spare moments. Bram began talking to passers-by. Voice smooth, smiles carefully measured. He described Ravenford fish as if it had been raised on poetry and clean water. He described their wool as if it had been combed by angels with very practical hands. Mara stood behind the goods, eyes scanning the crowd. She watched fingers and faces, noting who looked too interested in their bundles and who looked too interested in their pockets. Alden watched Bram work and felt grudging respect. Bram was a storm of words, but he knew how to steer that storm when he focused. The first buyer was a woman with a heavy cloak and sharp eyes. She inspected the fish, sniffed, and nodded. Good. Not too old. Bram smiled. Fresh as the cold itself. The woman replied. The cold is old. Bram blinked. Then he recovered. Yes, but it keeps well. They settled a small trade for a handful of coins and a strip of good cloth. Alden touched the cloth. Strong weave. This would help at Ravenford. Elin would approve, which was a rare and precious thing. More buyers came. Some wanted to haggle like it was sport. Some wanted a quick exchange. Bram handled most of it. Alden stepped in when woodwork was involved, explaining the quality of a handle or the strength of a peg. Mara stepped in when someone tried to push too close, and her calm stare was enough to move them away. In the middle of the day, a man approached who did not look like a bard. His robe was plain but clean. His hands were not the hands of a labourer. His face was calm, his eyes curious in a steady way. He spoke in careful Norse, with a soft English accent. You are from the north. Bram turned on his best smile. We are. And you are from a place where people write things down and then pretend paper is stronger than hunger. The man's mouth curved slightly. That is not entirely wrong. My name is Father Rowan. Mara's eyes narrowed just a little. A monk. Father Rowan nodded. Yes, I have worked with traders before. I help translate and settle disputes when people are willing to be settled. Bram said. Disputes in a market. How rare. Father Rowan looked at the fish. Good goods. Your hands have done honest work. Alden asked, Why are you speaking to us? Father Rowan answered simply, Because I saw you pay the dock fee without shouting. That suggests you know when to spend and when to fight. Also, your friend talks too much, which means you will need someone to listen. Bram placed a hand on his chest. I am wounded again, Mara said. You will live, Father Rowan continued. There are men in York who dislike North traders unless they can profit from them. Some will try to push you into bad deals. Some will try to accuse you of breaking rules you did not know existed. If you want, I can help you navigate the rules, Bram asked. And what do you want in return? Father Rowan smiled faintly. Food for the poorhouse. A small portion of your profit, not all. I am a monk, not a miracle worker. Alden considered. He did not trust easily, but he trusted hunger. Hunger was honest. And Father Rowan spoke like a man who had been hungry before. Bullion, Alden said. Help her avoid traps. We will give a portion to the poorhouse. Father Rowan nodded. Good. Then first trap. Do not sell all your fish here. A fish guild man will arrive soon and claim you owe a tax if you sell beyond a certain amount. If you sell part through a licensed stall, you reduce the problem. Bram frowned. Licensed stall sounds expensive. Father Rowan said. Less expensive than a fine. Mara murmured. That is how they get you. Pay now or pay later. Later costs more. Father Rowan led them to a stall run by a man named Giles Mercer, a local trader with a narrow face and quick eyes. Giles greeted Father Rowan politely, which told Alden that Father Rowan had influence. Influence was also a kind of currency. Giles Mercer inspected their fish. Good. I can move these. My cut is fair, Bram asked. Define fair. Giles Mercer named his cut. Bram inhaled sharply, then looked at Alden as if he wanted permission to be offended. Father Rowan said quietly, That is fair here. Alden nodded once. Better to accept a fair cut than lose the entire sale to fines and fights. They agreed. A portion of their fish would go through Giles Mercer. The deal would bring less profit per fish, but more safety. Safety was worth something, even when it felt like paying for air. As the afternoon continued, the crowd thickened. Alden felt eyes on them. Not buyers, but watchers. Men who leaned too close and listened to prices. Men who glanced at their bundles and then at each other. Mara stepped closer to Alden. "We have attention," Alden asked quietly. "What kind?" Mara replied, "The kind that wants your goods without paying, or wants to make you pay twice." Father Rowan returned from a quick walk and spoke low. "There is a man named Garrick Holt watching you. He deals in cloth and trouble. He likes to claim North traders are cheating waits," Bram said. "We are not cheating waits," Father Rowan replied. "That does not matter. It only matters what he can convince others of." Alden felt the soft tension rise. He kept his face calm. "What do we do?" Father Rowan said. "We use public fairness. We weigh everything in front of witnesses. We speak clearly. We do not lose our temper. Men like Garrick Holt feed on temper," Bram whispered. "That is unfortunate. I have a temper in storage," Mara said. "Keep it stored." As if summoned by the mention, Garrick Holt approached. He was tall, dressed in decent cloth, with a smile that looked friendly until you noticed it did not reach his eyes. He nodded at Bram. "Good afternoon. New traders." Bram smiled back. "Yes, new fish. Old cold." Garrick Holt laughed politely. "I see you sell fish and wool. Tell me, what weights do you use?" Alden stepped forward. "Standard weights, measured stones and a balance." Garrick Holt looked skeptical. "Standard in the north is not standard here." Father Rowan appeared beside Alden like a quiet shield. "The traders will weigh goods on the market scale, in front of witnesses, as is proper." Garrick Holt's eyes flicked to Father Rowan. "Ah." "Father Rowan, always helping the lost lambs," Father Rowan replied. "Someone must. Wolves are busy." A few nearby buyers chuckled softly. Garrick Holt's smile tightened. He turned back to Alden. "Fine. Use the market scaled. If your weights are fair, there is no problem." Alden nodded. "No problem." Garrick Holt lingered a moment, then moved away, but he did not go far. He stayed where he could watch. Like Harold Crowe, Garrick Holt believed attention was a weapon. They weighed goods on the market scale in full view. The weights matched. The buyers nodded. The witnesses murmured. Father Rowan spoke with the scalekeeper, ensuring the process was recorded in the local way. Bram leaned toward Alden. "I do not enjoy being inspected like a fish," Alden replied. "Then do not smell like whey." Bram looked offended. "That is unfair. We all smell like fish," Mara said. "Some of us smell like fish and fear. Try to reduce the fear." As evening approached, they counted their earnings. Note of fortune, but meaningful. Enough coins to buy cloth, iron nails, and salt if they found it. Alden felt a quiet satisfaction that did not feel like joy exactly. It felt like relief with sharp edges. Father Rowan walked with them toward a small guest house near the church. It was not warm like a hearth dream, but it had a roof that did not leak and walls that held the wind back. In winter, that was luxury. Bram asked Father Rowan, "Why do you help?" Father Rowan paused before answering. "Because I have watched people starve in tidy rooms. Because I have watched men with full bellies call themselves righteous. Because trade can keep people alive if it is done with some mercy." Mara nodded. "Mercy is rare in markets," Father Rowan said. "That is why it must be practiced on purpose." Inside the guest house, they ate a simple meal and drank weak ale. Alden felt the heat return to his fingers. He thought of Elin and the Longhouse. He thought of the barley sack from Orkney. He thought of the pouch of salt, small but precious. He also thought of Harold Crowe and Oswin Vale. York was full of names and currents. Even when you avoided one trap, another waited nearby, quiet and patient. Before sleep, Father Rowan spoke to Alden alone. "There is a message runner in town, a man who carries notes between traders. I heard your chieftain Harold Crowe has a hand in many places." Alden kept his face calm. "He does?" Father Rowan asked. "Does he have a request of you here?" Alden answered carefully. "He tried. We refused." Father Rowan nodded slowly. "Then be cautious. Men like Harold Crow do not forget refusal. They only change tactics." Alden said. "I know," Father Rowan said. "Rest. Tomorrow you buy what you need. Keep your crew closed. And if Garrick Holt returns, let him choke on fairness again." Alden managed a small smile. "Thank you." Father Rowan replied, "Do not thank me yet. York is calm only when it is asleep, and even then it dreams of profit." Alden lay down and listened to the muffled city sounds. Somewhere outside, people laughed. Somewhere else, someone argued. Somewhere, a door slammed. York breathed like a living thing, hungry and busy. Alden closed his eyes and tried to sleep. Survival had brought him this far. Now it demanded he stay sharp while staying calm, which was one of the more annoying requirements of althood. Chapter 7. Dublin, Dockside and Silver that Sighs. York in the morning looked less impressive, which was comforting. In daylight every grand place revealed the same truth. Mud existed here too. People argued here too. Hunger walked the streets here too, only dressed in cleaner cloth. Alden rose early and counted their coins with Bram and Mara while Callum and Hugh kept watch at the dock. The pile was not large, but it was real. Real coins had weight. Promises did not. Bram rubbed his hands together. "Today we buy iron nails, cloth and salt. We will return home as respected traders and possibly minor legends," Mara said. "Buy nails first. Legends are not waterproof." Father Rowan met them near the market with 2 small sacks and a calm face. He guided them toward an iron worker who sold nails by weight. The nails were small, dull and beautiful in the way useful things were. Alden bought as many as he dared. He imagined Elin taking them from his hands and pretending not to be pleased while secretly building a warmer winter around them. They bought cloth next. Strong weave, plain colours, nothing fancy. Fancy cloth was a way to invite envy, and envy was the kind of visitor that did not leave. Salt was harder. The sellers smiled too much. The prices shifted like smoke. Father Rowan spoke quietly with one man, then shook his head. "Not today." Bram frowned. "We cannot return without salt," Mara said. "We can return without salt. It will be worse," Father Rowan said. "Dublin has more salt, sometimes. It is a busy port, many routes, many goods, many problems." Hugh and Callum returned from the dock with a report. 2 men had watched the boat and then drifted away when Callum stared at them long enough. The boat was intact. Their bundles were intact. Their luck had held, which was never guaranteed. By late morning they pushed off from York, sliding downriver and out toward open water again. The sea greeted them like an old enemy that remembered your name but did not bother to pronounce it correctly. The crossing toward Dublin took days. Not all days were storms. Most were cold and tiring and steady, the kind of hardship that did not make a good story but did make a true one. They slept in shifts. They ate small meals. They kept the boat moving. Bram talked in smaller portions, which everyone appreciated even if no one praised him for it. Praise encouraged behaviour, and nobody wanted Bram encouraged. When Dublin finally rose on the horizon, it did not look like a promise. It looked like a crowded challenge. Masts filled the harbour like a forest made of wood and ambition. Smoke hung over the town. The sound of many voices carried over the water. Bram's eyes widened. "Dublin, where silver changes hands so often it starts to look tired," Hugh muttered. "Everything is tired, even silver." Alden guided them into the harbour with careful patience. Small boats darted around them. Dock workers shouted, traders waved, men watched with hungry attention. Callum said, "Too many eyes." Mara replied, "Eyes are normal, hands are the problem." They paid a mooring fee again. It hurt again. Alden reminded himself that survival required paying for irritation. On the dock they met a local broker named Nolan Gray. He was middle-aged, neatly dressed, and smiling like a man who believed smiles were a kind of fence. His Norse was decent, his English was smooth, his interest was obvious. Nolan Gray said, "New arrivals from the north. You have fish, wool, Perhaps timber. Dublin has buyers. Bram stepped forward. We have goods, and we have honest weights. Nolan Grey laughed softly. Everyone has honest weights until the scale is checked. But do not worry, I can help you sell quickly, for a fair cut. Hugh whispered to Alden. Fair cut means he will bite. Mara whispered back. Most men bite. The question is how hard. Alden kept his voice calm. We can sell ourselves. Nolan Grey nodded as if he approved. Of course, but Dublin is busy. Busy places eat slow traders. If you want speed and safety, you use someone who knows the currents, Bram asked. What is your cut? Nolan named it. Bram held his face steady with effort. It was a large bite. Alden said, No. Nolan's smile did not vanish, but it cooled. Then you will sell slowly, and perhaps you will meet men who like to solve problems with fists. That is not pleasant, Mara said. We prefer problems solved with words and soup. Nolan Grey looked at her, then nodded slightly. A healer. Good. You will be busy here. Dublin coughs in winter like an old man with secrets. Alden kept his tone firm. We will not use you, but we will buy information. Where is the salt? Where is the iron? Where is the safest market? Nolan Grey considered. He named places and times. He also named a warning. Do not sell near the East Docks after dark. A group there likes to unalive hope. He said it politely, like a man offering a weather forecast. Bram said, Thank you. We will avoid being unalived. It does not fit our schedule. Nolan Grey smiled again, warmer. You are amusing. That helps. Dublin likes amusing people. It also likes eating them. But still, they moved into the city with their goods and their caution. Dublin felt different from York. York had rules and walls and a kind of organised busyness. Dublin had motion and noise and a sharp edge of uncertainty, like the whole place might change its mind about you at any moment. They found a market space where other Norse traders stood near locals, all of them pretending to be friendly while measuring each other. Alden laid out fish and wool again. Bram began his careful sales work. Callum and Hugh stayed close, eyes scanning. Mara watched hands. Sales were fast at first. Fish moved quickly, wool moved slower. A local cloth trader offered decent cloth in exchange for wool, and Alden accepted because cloth always mattered. They found a salt cellar. The price was high, but the salt was reals. Alden bought a small amount. Not enough to feel safe, but enough to feel less doomed. As the day wore on, Alden noticed something else. Near the docks, men stood in groups watching boats and cargo. Some watched like guards, some watched like predators, some watched like they were waiting for a signal. Father Rowan was not here to translate the hidden rules. Nolan Grey had offered hints, but hints were not shields. Alden kept their deals simple. Sell, buy, leave. He tried to keep Bram focused. Bram, to his credit, stayed focused, perhaps because the city felt too sharp for even him to relax. Near late afternoon, a thin man approached their goods with a polite smile. His name was Cormac Dale. He spoke Norse with an Irish accent. Cormac Dale said, Your fish is good. I have buyers for more. Larger buyers. Bram brightened. Larger buyers often have larger coins, Mara said softly. Larger buyers also have larger traps. Cormac Dale ignored her tone and kept his smile. I can take your fish in bulk. You avoid selling all day. You avoid the dock trouble. I pay in silver. Fair? Alden asked. Why you? Cormac Dale shrugged. I'm a middleman. I earn by making things smooth. Hugh muttered. Smooth is what thieves call slippery. Cormac Dale glanced at Hugh, then back to Alden. If you do not want it, fine. Others will. But winter is coming. You want quick profit. Alden did want quick profit. He also wanted to return home alive with goods intact and with his crew still trusting him. Alden said, We will sell what we have here, no bulk deals. Cormac Dale's smile tightened. You are cautious. Cautious men die poor, Mara replied. Poor men can still breathe. Cormac Dale looked at her again, then shrugged and walked away. Bram sighed. That could have been easy, Hugh said. Easy is suspicious. They finished the day with a modest gain. Not huge, but steady. Alden felt relief, then felt guilt for feeling relief while the city around him stayed hungry. In the evening they returned to the dock to check the boat. Callum and Hugh had kept watch, but even good watch could not stop every hand. Alden saw it immediately. A rope on one bundle had been cut and retied poorly. Someone had tested them. Someone had decided they were worth more attention, Callum said. I scared off 2 men earlier. But someone came later, quiet. Hugh spit into the mud. Not enough to scare them. Bram looked pale. Someone tried to take our goods. Mara crouched and examined the rope. They were careful. They did not. They measured. They might come back. Alden tightened the lashings and moved the most valuable items deeper under other bundles. He did not have the luxury of full safety. He had the luxury of being less convenient to rob. They found a cheap shelter near the docks, a low building with rough beds and a fire that did its best. Bram complained quietly, then stopped when Mara looked at him. In the night, Alden woke to shouting outside. No right beside them, but close enough. He heard running feet. He heard a short cry that cut off quickly, like someone had learned the cost of being loud. Mara sat up across the room, already awake. She did not speak. She listened, eyes steady. Bram whispered, "What is happening?" Hugh whispered back, "Dublin." Callum muttered, "Stay still." The sounds faded, silence returned, but it felt thin, like a blanket with holes. In the morning, they returned to the market for one more round. Alden wanted to leave Dublin quickly, but he also needed a few more items. More nails, a better knife, a small amount of oil if possible. They found an oil cellar. The price was painful. Alden bought a small jar anyway. Oil meant light. Light meant work. Work meant survival. Near the docks, Alden saw something that made his stomach tighten. A group of men were unloading cargo from a ship while another group watched closely. The cargo was not barrels or cloth. It was people. Tired, thin, moving under pressure, eyes down, not chained in a way that was obvious, but controlled in a way that was worse because it pretended to be normal. Bram saw it too and went quiet, which was rare and therefore alarming. Mara's voice was low. "Do not stare." Alden forced himself to look away, then looked back again, slower. He felt the urge to do something, and he felt the truth that doing something could get them all unalived. The Viking Age was full of moments like this. You could not fix everything. You could barely fix your own roof. A man near them noticed Alden watching and smiled, interested. Good workers. Strong backs. Bram's voice sounded strained. "We are not buying that." The man shrugged. "Someone will." Mara stepped forward slightly, her calm face turning colder. Not from anger, from judgment. It made the man look away, as if he had been reminded of something he did not like to remember. Alden pulled Bram back toward their stall. "Focus. We sell, we buy, we leave." Bram swallowed. "Yes, but it feels wrong," Mara said softly. "Many things feel wrong. That does not mean you can fix them. It means you should remember them." Alden nodded. Remembering was not enough, but it was something. Sometimes all you could do was refuse to pretend it was fine. By afternoon they had what they could reasonably carry. They returned to the boat. They checked every knot. They paid another fee to leave, which felt like a final insult. Dublin was generous that way. As they pushed off, Bram looked back at the crowded harbour. His voice was quiet. "I thought trade would feel cleaner," Hugh replied. "Nothing is clean, only washed," Mara added. "And even washed things carry stains. The trick is not to pretend you do not see them." Alden guided the boat out of the harbour and into open water again. The sea felt cold and simple compared to the city. Cold and simple were not always bad. They sailed east toward the next point on their route. Toward Hedeby, where trade was larger, rules were stranger, and Harold Crow's shadow might reach again. Alden felt the coins in their pouch. He felt the salt in the jar. He felt the memory of Dublin Dockside. Silver did not shine the same after you saw what people traded when they had power. Still, Winter demanded they continue. Winter did not accept moral speeches as payment. It accepted food, cloth, nails, and luck. Chapter 8. Hedeby Crossroads of Everything. The voyage from Dublin toward Hedeby was long enough for the sea to get bored again and start inventing new ways to be unpleasant. No dramatic storms every day, just a steady collection of cold wind, shifting currents, and nights where sleep came in thin pieces. They moved along coasts when they could, taking shelter in small inlets, trading small goods for fresh water and news. Alden listened to news carefully now. News was another kind of weather. They heard of rival chiefs on the move. They heard of sickness in a few towns. They heard of a rich market at Hedeby where silver flowed like water, which meant it also disappeared like water. When Hedeby finally appeared, it was not a single place. It was a knot of places pulled tight. Ships in the harbour, smoke in the air, a ring of buildings and workshops and stalls, people from many lands, many tongues, many habits, and smelled of wood shavings, iron, smoke, and the sweet edge of spices. Bram stared like a man seeing a dream. Hedeby. If York is a busy mouth, Hedeby is a whole stomach. Hugh muttered. Then it will digest us. Callum said, keep close. Mara said, keep calm. Busy places want panic. Panic is easy to steal from. They docked and paid again. Alden did it with a face that said, yes, I hate this, and no, I will not show you how much. The dock worker took the coins like they were owed by nature. The market was larger than York and rougher than Dublin. It had rules, but the rules were layered. Local rules, guild rules, leader rules, and the hidden rules of who you insulted by standing in the wrong place. They found a space near other Norse traders and set up their remaining goods. Their fish was nearly gone now. Their wool was smaller in quantity. They had a few crafted items and some cloth from York that could be traded again for something better. Alden wanted iron tools, better nails, possibly a small anvil piece. He also wanted to leave quickly, but he knew Hedeby could offer the best trade if handled carefully. A man approached with a tray of weights and a sharp expression. Guild marker. He spoke quickly. Market registration. Bram smiled. Of course. Where do we register? The man named a fee and pointed toward a clerk table. Hugh said, another fee, Mara said quietly. Better to pay one fee than pay 3 fines. Alden paid. He did not enjoy it. He reminded himself that Elin would enjoy the results. That was how he kept going. At the clerk table, an older woman marked their names on a board with careful lines. She asked where they were from. Alden said Ravenford. She nodded like she had heard of it and did not care. She stamped their mark in wax and waved them away. Bram whispered, I miss the sea. The sea only wants to drown you. These people want to drown you slowly and charge for it. Mara whispered back, the sea also charges. It just takes payment in fingers. They began trading. Hedeby buyers were skilled. They inspected everything, they asked questions, they offered low. Bram fought with words, Alden fought with patience. Callum stood like a silent wall, Hugh stood like a sharper wall. Mara watched the crowd. Alden found an iron seller with nails and small tools. The seller was a man named Soren Flint. He had soot at his hands and a face like carved stone. Soren Flint said, you want nails, you pay silver. No stories, Bram said. That is harsh, Soren Flint replied. Harsh is winter, this is business. Alden bought nails and a small hatchet head, paying more than he wanted and less than he feared. He also bought a simple knife with a good edge. He imagined Elin using it to cut rope and glare at it for being in her way. As they finished, Mara touched Alden's arm lightly. Someone is watching. Not a thief. A messenger. Alden turned and saw a young man standing a short distance away, cloak plain, eyes alert. The man stepped closer when Alden noticed him. He spoke quietly. Alden Stone. Alden's chest tightened. Yes. The messenger handed him a small token, carved wood with a crow mark. Harold Crow. Bram went stilled. Hugh cursed softly and then replaced it with a grunt. Callum's jaw tightened. Alden took the token without showing reaction. What does he want? The messenger said. A reminder. Harold Crow expects his barrel and wool on time, and he expects you to remember who keeps the coast orderly. Mara said calmly. The coast keeps itself orderly, mostly by being cold enough to discourage excitement. The messenger ignored her. He looked at Alden. Also, there is a man in Hedeby who expects a conversation. Name of Knut Ware, Bram whispered. Knut Ware, that is a broker. He moves goods. He also moves trouble, Hugh muttered. Everyone moves trouble. Alden asked the messenger, why? The messenger shrugged. I deliver words, not reasons. Knut Ware waits near the east stalls. Alden felt the old anger rise, then pressed it down. Anger was loud. Loud got you unalived in crowded places, he said. Tell Harold Crow we will meet our agreement. Tell him nothing else. The messenger nodded and walked away like a man leaving a package. The package was worry. Bram leaned close. Knut Ware is connected. If Harold Crow is using him, that means Harold is reaching into Hedeby. Mara said, or Knut Ware is reaching toward Harold. These men like to weave nets together. Callum asked, do we meet him? Hugh said, no. Bram said, yes, because if we do not, he will meet us anyway, juice worse. Alden stared at the market crowd, the moving faces, the hands, the smiles. Hedeby felt like a place where secrets could disappear quickly. It also felt like a place where secrets could find you no matter where you stood. Alden said, we meet him, but we do it in daylight, in public, mere witnesses. We do not go to private rooms. We do not drink anything we did not pour. We do not accept unknown pouches. Bram nodded quickly. Excellent rules. I love rules. Mara said, you love rules when they protect you from your own choices. Bram said, exactly. They walked toward the east stalls. Alden kept his pace steady. He wanted to look like a man going to buy rope, not a man walking toward trouble. Knut Ware stood near a stall of fine cloth. He was well dressed, with hair neatly kept, and a smile that looked smooth. His eyes were the eyes of a man who measured everything, including the space between your words. Knut Ware greeted them in clear Norse. Alden Stone, Ravenford. A builder, a trader now, Alden replied, temporarily. Knut Ware smiled. Everyone is temporary. Some people just refuse to admit it. Harold Crow sends his regards. Alden kept his voice calm. Harold Crow sends demands. Regards are cheaper. Knut Ware laughed softly, as if Alden was charming instead of dangerous. You have a sharp tongue. That is useful. Let us speak plainly. Harold Crow wants influence. Influence needs connections. You are a moving connection. A boat on the sea carrying goods, carrying news. Mara said, we carry our own news. Knut Ware turned to her politely. Healers carry more news than anyone. People talk when they are afraid. Mara did not blink. People also talk when they want to hide what they have done. Knut Ware looked back to Alden. Harold Crow wanted you to carry a pouch to York. You refused. That was unwise, but also interesting. It means you have pride, Hugh said. Pride keeps us alive. Knut Ware nodded. Sometimes. Sometimes it gets you unalived in a ditch. But let us be calm. I am not here to threaten. Threats are loud and childish. I am here to offer an exchange. Bram asked. An exchange of what? Knut Ware gestured lightly. Harold Crow will ease his pressure on Ravenford if you agree to a simple service. When you return north, you stop at a certain shore and deliver a message to a certain man. No pouch, just words. You can remember words, yes. Alden felt the trap shape itself. Words could be as dangerous as pouches, sometimes more. Alden asked, which shore, which man? Knut Ware named a coastal settlement and a trader name. Rolf Vane. Mara's eyes narrowed. Rolf Vane is known for selling safety and delivering harm? Bram whispered. I have heard of him. He charges for protection like Harold does, only he smiles more, Knut Ware said. You see, you already know the currents. This is good. You deliver words. You return. Harold Crow becomes less interested in squeezing your home. Everyone breathes easier, Hugh said, and we become part of their net. Knut Ware smiled at Hugh. You are direct. I respect that. Yes, a net. But a net can also catch food. It depends who holds it. Alden stared at Knut Ware. He wanted to refuse. He also wanted Elin to have space to run the farm without Harold Crow leaning on her every day. He wanted to bring safety home, even if it was not pure. Mara spoke quietly to Alden. If you accept, they own you a little. If you refuse, they target you openly. But you can choose a third path. You can reshape the offer. Alden took a slow breath and spoke to Canute Ware. We will not deliver secret words to secret men. If Harold Crow wants less tension, he can accept our existing agreement. We will pay what we promised. We will provide boat work. That is it. Canute Ware's smile faded slightly, then returned, calm and stubborn. Interesting. But Harold likes certainty. He likes having people in his pocket, Alden replied. Then he should buy a pocket. I am not for sale. A few nearby traders glanced over. Not enough to be a crowd, but enough to be witnesses. Canute Ware leaned in slightly, voice lower. You are in Hedeby. Not your home field. Do not confuse daylight with safety. Alden kept his tone steady. Do not confuse quiet threats with strength. Strength does not need to whisper. Canute Ware watched him for a moment, then laughed softly. Very well. You refuse. That means Harold will remain interested in you. And I will remain curious. Curiosity is not a threat. It is a habit, Mara said. Some habits are dangerous. Canute Ware nodded. Many are. Still, I appreciate a man who does not bend easily. Enjoy Hedeby. Buy your nails. Return home. We will see how long pride keeps you warm. He stepped back and turned away, as if the conversation had been a simple trade that did not go his way. He blended into the crowd with practiced ease. Bram exhaled slowly. That went better than I expected. I expected knives, Hugh said. Knives come later, when people stop watching, Callum said. We leave soon. Alden nodded. Yes, we sell what remains, we buy what we need. We do not stay long enough for curiosity to sharpen into action. They spent the rest of the day moving quickly, trading and buying with focus. Alden bought a small bundle of iron rivets and a better awl for leatherwork. Bram traded cloth for a small amount of salt and a jar of oil. Mara bought dried herbs not found in Norway, paying with a few coins and a look that suggested she would remember the seller. By evening they returned to the boat with their goods tied down and their nerves stretched but intact. Callum and Hugh checked the dock area before settling in. No obvious watchers. That did not mean none. Alden sat on the boat edge and looked out at Hedeby lights, small and flickering. He felt the constant tension of living under other men's ambitions. Harold Crow, Canute Ware, Rolf Vane, names like stones in a pocket. Mara sat beside him. You did well, Alden asked. Did I? Mara replied. You refused without shouting. You did not give them a hook. You did not pretend they are harmless. You treated them like weather. You prepared, you adjusted, you moved on. Bram joined them with a tired grin. And we got nails. Elin will be pleased, which means she will complain in a warmer tone. Hugh snorted. That is the best reward, Callum said quietly. Tomorrow we sail. Alden nodded. Tomorrow they would leave the crowded crossroads and return to the simpler danger of the sea. Simple danger was not always safer, but it was easier to understand. He lay down that night with the sound of many strangers nearby and the memory of Canute Ware's calm smile. The Viking Age was harsh, but it was rarely honest about what it wanted. It wanted survival. It wanted power. It wanted both, and it rarely admitted the difference. Alden closed his eyes and chose sleep anyway. Sleep was not a luxury. It was another tool. He would need it. Chapter 9. Iceland Lava and Law. They left Hedeby before the market could decide what they were worth. Alden considered that a form of success. In busy places you either left early or you left late and lighter. The sea took them north and west, past coasts that looked familiar in shape but foreign in mood. Some nights the wind was steady and almost helpful. Some nights it turned cruel, as if it remembered the storm it had promised earlier and felt embarrassed for being polite. Alden kept the crew in routine. Rope checks, lashings tight, food measured, water guarded, sleep in shifts. Small rules that made the difference between a hard voyage and an unalived crew. Bram Reed tried to tell fewer stories and succeeded most of the time. When he slipped, Mara Ash would glance at him with quiet judgment and Bram would return to silence like a dog returning to a leash. Hugh Tanner watched the horizon and complained at it. Callum Wren rode when needed and spoke only where words were necessary, which made every sentence feel like a tool pulled from a chest. They stopped along the way for fresh water and small trades. Most places had the same winter look: smoke, thin faces, careful hospitality. People were kinder when they expected you to leave soon. One evening they met a small coastal crew who spoke of new land far to the west, not a rumour, a place with hot springs and black sand and grass that fought hard to exist, a place where people had built turf walls because wood was scarce and the wind did not respect trees anyway. Bram listened, eyes bright. Iceland, Hugh muttered. A place named for ice. That sounds welcoming, Mara said. Names are honest sometimes. Alden felt the pull of it, not because he wanted new land for glory. He wanted new land for distance. Harold Crow's reach had limits. So did Cnut Ware's curiosity. A place far enough away could give a person room to breathe. They reached Iceland after days of sea and cold that felt like it had settled into their bones. The first sight of shore was stark. Dark rock, low hills, steam rising from the ground in pale ribbons. It looked like the earth itself was sighing. Bram whispered, "It is beautiful." Hugh replied, "It looks like the world gave up halfway through making it," Callum said. "It looks like it will not forgive mistakes," Mara said. "Neither does Norway. At least this place admits it." They found a sheltered cove where a small cluster of turf houses sat close together like they were trying to share warmth. A few people came down to the shore, watching the new boat with cautious interest. Alden stepped onto land and felt the ground solid under his feet. He had missed that, even though land came with its own problems. A man approached, tall and weathered, with hair tied back and a calm face. He spoke Norse with a slightly different rhythm. "Welcome. I am Magnus Hale. This is Ashridge." Alden nodded. "Alden Stone. We come to trade and rest. We have some goods. We seek supplies and a place to dry." Magnus Hale studied their boat, then their faces. "You look like the sea tried to teach you manners," Hugh said. "The sea is a harsh teacher." Magnus smiled faintly. "It is. Come, we have space. Not much, but enough." They carried bundles up the slope to the turf houses. The air smelled different here, less pine smoke, more peat. The warmth inside the main house felt softer, less sharp than in Norway, as if the walls had learned to hold it carefully. A woman with dark hair and steady eyes greeted them. Her name was Sigrid Vale. She offered them hot broth that tasted faintly of herbs and something mineral. It was strange and comforting. Bram took a sip and nodded solemnly. "Iceland tastes like it is trying," Sigrid Vale replied. "Iceland is always trying. That is why anyone survives here." Mara watched Sigrid's hands, working hands, quick and calm. Mara respected that. They rested for a day, drying clothes, eating simple food, repairing small gear. Alden checked the boat and found only minor issues. A few lines needed replacing, a seam needed a touch more tar. The sea had been rude, but the boat had held, which made Alden feel proud in a quiet way. Ashridge was small. The people were fewer, the land gave less. But the community felt tighter, because it had to be. Here, losing a neighbour was not just sad, it was dangerous. Magnus Hale showed Alden the hot spring near the ridge. Steam rose from a shallow pool, and the air around it felt like a secret warmth the earth kept for itself. Magnus said, "The spring helps in winter. It does not solve hunger, but it makes cold less cruel." Alden nodded. Elin would like this place. She would complain about it, but she would like it. Magnus smiled. "Who is Elin?" Alden said. "My sister. She runs a farm with stubbornness and arithmetic." Magnus laughed softly. "Iceland respects arithmetic. It is the only magic we trust." News in Ashridge travelled fast. They learned that a law gathering would be held soon at Thingvellir, the Assembly Plains. People from across the island would come. Disputes would be settled, agreements made, winter plans shared. In a harsh land, law was not about pride, it was about survival with fewer surprises. Father Rowan was not with them now, but his influence had followed in a way. A few in Ashridge had met monks and traders. They asked about York and Dublin and Hedeby. Alden answered carefully. Bram answered with extra details. Hugh answered with grunts that could be translated as, "Please stop asking." Mara listened more than she spoke. She watched the island people, their quiet focus, their tired humour, the way they did not waste words on pretending things were fine. On the morning they travelled to Thingvellir, the sky was pale and the air cold enough to make breathing feel like work. They joined a small group from Ashridge. Magnus Hale led, Sigrid Vale walked beside him. Others followed with packs and quiet determination. The path crossed rough ground. Lava fields cracked under thin snow. The landscape looked sharp, like it had been cut and left unfinished. Alden admired it in the way you admire a blade that will not lie about what it can do. Bram whispered to Mara, "If I trip, I will die of embarrassment before the cold gets me." Mara whispered back, "Then do not trip," Bram said. "Thank you. That advice is perfect and useless." Thingvellir lay in a broad valley where dark rock walls rose on either side. A river ran through it, cold and clear. People gathered in clusters, cloaks pulled tight, faces set with the calm seriousness of those who knew the law could keep them from being eaten by each other's desperation. Alden felt the familiar tension of assemblies. He remembered Stonefields. He remembered Harold Crow turning law into pressure. Here the mood was different. People came because they needed rules to hold, not because they wanted to show power. A law speaker stood at a central rock. His name was Thorin Beck, an older man with a voice that carried without shouting. He opened the assembly with clear words and no theatre. "The assembly is open. Speak your claims. Bring witnesses. Be fair. Winter is listening," Bram murmured. "Winter is always listening," Hugh murmured back. "Winter hears everything. It just does not care." Alden watched cases unfold. A boundary dispute, a grazing agreement, a boat-sharing plan, a complaint about a man who took too much driftwood and then pretended it had washed up onto his land personally. The judgments were practical. Payback, share, work, repair. No grand punishments, just corrections meant to keep people from falling apart. Mara seemed calmer here. She spoke with a healer from another settlement and exchanged herbs. They discussed coughs and frostbitten fingers and the way pride made injuries worse. Alden listened and learned. In harsh places, the best law was the law that reduced conflict, not the law that rewarded loudness. Later, Magnus Hale stepped forward with a case. A family near Ashridge had lost a roof beam. Their house was collapsing. They needed timber, but timber was scarce. Magnus said, "We propose a shared timber store. Driftwood and salvaged boards are held in common. Those in need can take from it with assembly approval, and they repay with labour or goods when able." A murmur ran through the crowd. Some nodded, some frowned. People liked sharing in theory, until the thing being shared was the thing keeping you alive. A man named Eirik Frost stepped forward, arms crossed. "Common stores invite thieves," Magnus replied. "Private stores invite neighbours to starve. Thieves appear either way," Bram whispered. "I like this place." "They argue like adults," Hugh whispered back. "Do not praise it. The world hates praise." Thorin Beck considered and spoke. "The shared store is approved under rules, records kept, requests made at assemblies, repayment expected when possible, theft punished by labour repayment and loss of future access, not exile unless repeated. Winter is harsh enough. We do not add cruelty without reason." Alden felt something in his chest loosen. It was not joy. It was the feeling of seeing people choose sense over pride. After the gathering, Alden walked the edge of the valley and looked at the rock walls. The wind moved through the gap with a low sound. It felt like the land had a voice. Father Rowan appeared near him. Alden froze for a heartbeat, then realized it was not Father Rowan. It was a different man, wearing a simple cloak, carrying a staff. His face was similar in calmness, but younger. He spoke in careful Norse. "I am Rowan Birch, not the monk. I get mistaken sometimes." Alden blinked, then nodded. "That is unfortunate," Rowan Birch smiled. "It can be. I carry messages between settlements. I heard you are from Norway." Alden's caution returned. "Yes." Rowan Birch said. A message reached the assembly from a trader route. Harold Crow is asking about you. Bram drifted close, ears alert. Always, Hugh muttered. Of course, Alden kept his voice steady. What does he want now? Rowan Birch shrugged. He wants to know if you'll return soon, and if you'll keep your agreement. He also told people you're unreliable. That is a common strategy among men who want you to feel small. Mara joined them, eyes sharp. Men who feel threatened like to spread stories. Rowan Birch nodded. Exactly. The message is not a threat. It is a warning. When you return, expect pressure. Alden said. Thank you. Rowan Birch hesitated, then added. There is also a rumour that Knut Ware is sending word north. He is curious. He likes nets. Bram sighed. Everyone likes nets. I am tired of nets, Mara said. Then stop walking into them. Bram looked offended. I am trying. Alden thanked Rowan Birch again and watched him walk away. The Viking Age was full of distance, but rumours travelled faster than ships. That was one of the crueler tricks. That evening they sat by a small fire at the edge of the gathering area. People shared food and quiet talk. Not much, just enough. The kind of communal calm that made the cold feel less personal. Magnus Hale sat with them. He asked about Norway. Alden answered. Bram added stories. Hugh corrected Bram. Callum listened. Mara watched. Magnus said, If you stay in Iceland for winter you can. We need hands, we need skills. A boat builder is valuable. Alden felt the offer sink in. Staying would mean distance from Harold Crow. It would mean learning this harsh land. It would also mean leaving Elin to face winter and Harold alone, which Alden could not accept. Alden said, We will return, but we might return later than planned. We need to choose the right window. We do not race winter. Magnus nodded. Wise. Winter punishes haste, Mara said softly. Winter punishes everything. Haste just makes it easier. Bram stared at the fire. Part of me wants to stay. This place is harsh, but it feels honest, Hugh said. It is honest about being harsh. That is rare. Callum spoke quietly. Home is still home. Eldon felt the truth of that. Home was Elin. Home was the Longhouse smoke. Home was the fjord pretending to be calm. Home was the problem and also the reason to keep going. They returned to Ashridge and settled into a short winter pause. Not a full season, but long enough to rest, repair, and wait for a safer weather window. They helped men turf walls. They hauled water. Alden repaired a small boat and taught a young man how to set a seam properly. Mara treated coughs and sore joints. Bram traded small goods and learned to speak less. Hugh learned nothing new but remained alive. Callum stayed steadied. In quiet moments, Alden thought of Elin and wondered how many lines she had added to her ledger since he left. He imagined her doing the math of survival, one mark at a time, refusing to panic because panic did not repair roofs. When the sky began to shift and the wind turned slightly less cruel, Alden knew the window was coming. Not wide, just possible. He gathered the crew by the boat. We sail soon, we sail carefully. We return with goods and with our bodies attached. Bram nodded solemnly. I prefer my body attached, Mara said. Then follow instructions, Bram said. Yes. Alden looked out at the sea. It lay grey and calm, pretending again. He did not trust it. He did not need to. He only needed to respect it. Chapter 10. Winter Return and the Small Victory. They left Iceland with the kind of calm that was really just disciplined fear. The boat was heavier now, with supplies traded and earned. Not luxury, but enough. Nails, salt, cloth, oil, a few iron tools, a small bundle of Icelandic herbs Mara insisted would help with winter coughs. Alden did not argue. He had learned that Mara's caution was usually cheaper than regret. Magnus Hale and Sigrid Vale walked them to the shore. Magnus clasped Alden's forearm. You will come back, Alden answered. Maybe, if the sea allows and if winter does not swallow my home. Sigrid Vale looked at Mara. Keep them alive. Mara replied, I will try. They are stubborn. Bram said, That is praise. Hugh said, It is not. Callum nodded once to the Icelanders, then stepped into the boat without ceremony. Callum treated departure like work. The trick was to do them properly, not emotionally. As they pushed off, Alden looked back at the dark shore and the steam rising from the hot spring ridge. Iceland felt like a hard teacher that did not waste time. He respected it. He also wanted to leave before he started believing distance could solve every problem. The return voyage was cold and long. The sea tested them again, but not with the same anger as before, more with persistence. A steady wind that wore down patience, a night of heavy rain that soaked everything and made every rope feel heavier. A day of fog that reduced the world to grey and forced Alden to steer by instinct and careful listening. They stopped when they could, sheltered when they had to, and kept moving when the window demanded it. Alden watched the sky the way Elin watched a ledger. Both were forms of reading the future. Bram grew quieter on the return, not silent, but softer. He started doing tasks before being told. He tied knots correctly. He checked lashings without being asked. Mara noticed and said nothing, which Bram seemed to take as a reward. Hugh remained harsh, but he also remained useful. He had the kind of honesty that did not soothe but did keep you awake. Callum remained steady. Mara remained calm. When they finally reached the familiar coastlines of Norway, Alden felt a tightness in his chest ease. Not because the danger was over, because the danger had a name he understood. They turned into the fjord toward Ravenford under a pale winter sky. The water lay smooth, the hills stood dark with patches of snow. Smoke rose from a few roofs, thin and stubborn. Bram whispered, "Home." Hugh muttered, "If Harold has not eaten it." Alden kept his eyes on the shore. He saw the boat shed, still standing. He saw the longhouse roof, still holding. He saw movement near the shore, people watching, waiting. Elin stood at the edge of the water with her cloak pulled tight. She did not wave, of course she did not. Waving was for people with spare warmth. Alden guided the boat in. The keel scraped gently. Callum jumped out first and pulled the bow line tight. Hugh followed, then Bram, then Mara. Alden stepped onto shore last. Elin walked toward him. Her eyes scanned him quickly, his face, his hands, his stance. Then she looked past him to the bundles. She said, "You are alive." Alden nodded, "Yes." Elin looked at Bram. "He is also alive," Bram said. "Against all odds." Elin looked at Mara. "You made it back." Mara nodded, "Yes." Elin's gaze returned to the bundles. "What did you bring?" Alden answered, "Nails, cloth, salt, oil, a few tools, barley, and some coins." Elin's face did not soften much, but her shoulders eased slightly. That was her version of relief. "Good," Bram whispered to Alden. "She is almost pleased." Hugh whispered back, "Do not say that out loud. You will ruin it." They carried goods to the longhouse. Elin followed, already calculating how to store and ration. She moved like a general preparing for war against winter, and winter was an enemy that did not accept surrender. Inside, the longhouse smelled the same as always: smoke, wool, old wood, survival. Alden felt a wave of tired gratitude that was almost too big for his chest. They unloaded the bundles. Elin inspected everything with sharp focus. Nails, good. Cloth, good. Salt, not much, but good. Oil, good. Barley, good. Coins, good. Then she looked at Alden. Harold Crow. The name dropped into the room like a cold stone. Alden said, "We have 1 barrel of fish and the smaller wool bundle ready as agreed, and I will do the boat work." Elin nodded. "He has been circling, not constant, but enough. He sent men twice. Polite threats. The kind that pretend they are jokes," Bram said. "I hate polite threats, they are so smug." Elin looked at him. "Everything you say is smug, you just dress it in smiles." Bram bowed slightly. "Fair?" Mara asked. "Did Harold take from you?" Elin shook her head. "Not yet. He likes to wait until you are weakest, then call it tradition." Alden felt anger rise and then settle into focus. "We do it now. We pay what we agreed. We give him no excuse." Elin's eyes narrowed. "He will still find Dut," Hugh said. "Wolves always find reasons." Callum said quietly, "Better to remove the easy reasons. They rested for one night. Not a full recovery, but enough to stop the body from shaking like a loose board. Elin fed them a meal that was noticeably better than oatmeal, which was her way of saying she was glad they returned without saying it. The next morning, Harold Crow arrived. He came with 2 men. Cloaks heavy, faces calm. He walked like he owned the ground. The ground did not argue, which encouraged him. Elin met him outside. Alden stood beside her. Mara stood slightly behind, watching. Bram stood nearby, trying to look harmless and failing. Hugh stood with arms crossed, looking like he could chew through wood. Callum stood silent, eyes steady. Harold smiled. Ravenford still stands. How wonderful, Elin replied. It stands because we keep it standing, not because you admire it. Harold's smile thinned. Elin Stone, always a blade, Walden stepped forward. We have your barrel of fish and the wool bundle, as agreed at the Thing, and I will repair your boat seams before spring. Harold's eyes flicked to the goods. He nodded slowly. Good. You have returned, you have paid, you have been sensible. Bram muttered. That is the nicest insult I have heard. Harold ignored Bram and looked at Alden. I also heard you travelled far. Dublin, Hedeby, even Iceland. Alden kept his face calm. Rumours travel, Harold replied. They do. And I hear you refused certain offers. You refused to carry messages. Elin's jaw tightened. We do not carry your trouble. Harold smiled again, a little colder. Trouble is part of life. You cannot refuse it. You can only choose whose trouble you carry. Mara spoke quietly. Some trouble is chosen, some is imposed. You seem to enjoy imposing. Harold glanced at Mara. Healers speak boldly because they think everyone needs them. Mara replied. Everyone does need healing, but not everyone deserves my silence. The air tightened. Harold's men shifted slightly. Hugh shifted too, and the shifting felt like weather turning. Alden spoke firmly, calm but hard. We met our agreement, that is all. If you want more, bring it to the Thing. Bring it in daylight. Bring it as a claim, not as a whisper. Harold studied Alden for a long moment, then he nodded. Very well. Daylight. Claims. You are learning. Perhaps travel has made you useful, Elin said. Travel made him tired. Harold laughed softly. Good. Tired people are easier to guide. Alden held his gaze. Not this tired. Harold's smile faded for a heartbeat, then returned. We will see. For now, I accept your payment. Your boat work will be done before spring. Alden nodded. It will. Harold turned to leave, then paused. One more thing. There will be another thing at Stonefield before spring. Attend. It is wise to be seen, Elin replied. We are seen all the time. That is the problem. Harold walked away without answering, cloak swaying. His men followed. The shore felt colder after he left, as if his presence had been a form of heat that burned instead of warmed. Elin exhaled. He will not stop, Alden said. No. But we can hold him to daylight. Mara nodded. Daylight is a weapon in harsh places. It is rare, but it is real, Bram said. I am glad we returned with nails. If Harold tries to squeeze us again, we can at least repair the roof while suffering, Hugh said. That is a grim comfort, Callum said. It is still comfort. Winter settled in fully. Days were short. Nights were long. Work did not stop. It never did. Alden repaired boats for neighbours and prepared to repair Harold's boat, because keeping a promise was also a form of defence. Elin rationed food with firm fairness. She organised people like a stern lullaby, steady and relentless. Mara treated coughs and aching joints. She used Icelandic herbs on a few elders and watched their breathing ease, which felt like a small victory that nobody celebrated loudly because celebrating tempted winter. Bram helped more than he talked, sometimes. He still talked, but he also chopped wood, hauled water, and even mended nets. He complained the entire time, which Elin considered proof of life. One evening, as snow fell lightly outside, Alden sat by the fire and watched the longhouse glow. Children slept. Elders murmured softly. The air smelled of smoke and broth and damp wood. Elin sat with the ledger board again. She made marks, then paused. She looked at Alden. She said quietly, You brought back enough. Alden felt something in his throat tighten. Enough was not abundance, enough was survival. In the Viking Age, enough was the dream. He nodded. We did. Elin looked back down at the ledger. Do not get proud. Alden managed a small smile. I will try. Mara spoke from nearby. Pride is hard to avoid. It grows in harsh soil, Hugh muttered. Then step on it, Bram said softly. I would like to say something sincere. Everyone turned to him with suspicion. Bram continued. I'm glad we are here. I'm glad we are alive. I'm glad Elin has nails. Elin stared at him. That was almost sincere. Bram nodded solemnly. I am learning, Callum said. Good. The winter did not become easier. It was still winter. It still demanded fuel and food and patience. But the roof held. The stores lasted. The coughs did not spread as badly as they could have. The boat shed stayed standing. Harold Crow remained a shadow at the edge of their lives, but he did not break into their longhouse, not this season. Perhaps daylight had made him cautious. Perhaps the thing had made him careful. Perhaps he was simply waiting, because men like Harold always waited. Alden understood that survival was not the end of struggle, it was the continuation of it, with slightly better tools. He looked around the longhouse and felt the quiet weight of a small victory. Not glorious, not dramatic, just real. Outside, the fjord lay dark and calm, pretending again. Inside, Ravenford breathed stubborn and steady.